5 years ago, the strange rule-based rumors arrived. A series of world fragments, filled with bizarre rules, randomly selected people from different countries to enter them. These people were called the Chosen Ones. The success or failure of the Chosen Ones directly impacted the fate of their nation. If they succeeded, they were rewarded, and their country's resources would grow, technology would leap forward, and even breakthroughs in the supernatural realm would occur. Failure meant death for the Chosen One, and their country would face a random, massive disaster, with resources drying up, the strange rumors becoming real, and the people suffering. This was a brutal live broadcast on a global scale, with no one able to escape. Dragon Country. National Fate Arena. A flood of bullet comments was about to hit. UN it's starting, oh la la, oh la la. I'm back again, a game that makes you younger the more you play, I'm sure. Countless netizens flooded the livestream with meaningless bullet comments. Today, it was time for the new round of Strange Rumors Dungeon to start. Countless people around the world held their breath, waiting for the choice of fate. In Dragon Country, in a small rented room, Gu Qingchen had just made a bowl of instant noodles and was holding his phone, typing. The lone wolf, I don't know which unlucky guy is going to be chosen, feel sorry for that unlucky guy for 2 seconds. He was an orphan, looked decent, but his face always carried an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care about anything. He held chopsticks in his right hand, and his phone in his left, eating while waiting for the unlucky guy to be selected. Suddenly, a cold, emotionless voice directly rang in his mind. Notification, Dragon Country's Chosen One has been selected. Name, Gu Qingchen. Loading the Strange Rumor Dungeon. Gu Qingchen's hand holding the chopsticks paused for a moment. Damn. The scene in front of him began to twist and blur. Then came the sound of his phone and chopsticks falling to the ground. The scent of instant noodles vanished, replaced by a faint musty odor in the air. Dragon Country's livestream has started. Almost simultaneously, billions of viewers flooded into Dragon Country's official livestream. Here it comes. Who's the new warrior? Bless Dragon Country, the losses last time were too big. Gu Qingchen? Why does that name sound like a male lead in a novel? The info says he's an ordinary person, unemployed? It's over. His looks are okay, but can that be eaten? Don't panic upstairs, let's see what the dungeon is first. Other countries have also started, go take a look. The Chosen One from Asen Country is a monk, his strange rumor seems to be a slaughterhouse, it looks a bit interesting. I hope this Gu Qingchen can last a little longer. The scene in front of Gu Qingchen stabilized. He found himself standing on an ancient street. The sky was gray, as if it was always stuck in the dusk. Surrounding him were old-style buildings, with blue bricks, gray tiles, wooden doors and windows. The street was paved with stone slabs, uneven and full of pits. The musty smell in the air was stronger, mixed with the scent of burned paper money. There was no one around. The silence was terrifying, there wasn't even the sound of wind. Only his own breathing and heartbeat could be heard. He looked down at himself, still wearing his ordinary casual clothes, completely out of place with the surrounding environment. Dungeon loaded successfully. Current dungeon, the wedding of the Nangong family, S-Class. Mode, single player. Background, you have married into the ancient Nangong family and will be married to the Nangong family's daughter in 3 days. During this period, please strictly follow the rules of the Nangong family and do your best to play your role as the groom. Remember, the Nangong family values rituals the most. S-Class? The live stream's bullet comments exploded instantly. S-Class. Starting with hell difficulty? It's over, the survival rate of S-Class dungeons in history is less than 5%. This Gu Qingchen doesn't seem strong at all. Is Dragon Country going to suffer again? Hurry, notify the analysis team. Prepare the tips. Calm down, it's just begun, let's see what happens. Gu Qingchen raised his eyebrows slightly. S-Class? That sounds troublesome. Marrying in? A wedding? Rules? The information was a bit too much. At that moment, the voice rang again. Get a chance to randomly draw a talent. Talent levels are divided into F, E, D, C, B, A, S, 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 S. Do you want to draw now? Draw. Gu Qingchen silently murmured in his heart. A phantom wheel, visible only to him, appeared in front of him and spun rapidly. A few seconds later, the wheel stopped, and the pointer pointed to an area emitting a deep light. Congratulations to the Chosen One for receiving the SSS level talent, Rule Breakdown. Rule Breakdown, you can actively destroy a rule of a dungeon you already know, making it temporarily ineffective. The duration and cooldown time depend on the strength of the rule and the level of the dungeon. However, be cautious, as destroying the rule will inevitably lead to unknown consequences. Use with care. SSS level? Gu Qingchen was stunned for a moment. Was his luck too good? He started with the highest level talent? But this talent's description, destroy the rules? He focused his thoughts, and the talent panel disappeared. This was his trump card, one he would never let anyone know, not even those watching him through the livestream. At the end of the street, a faint light appeared. An old man, dressed in dark clothes and holding a white lantern, had somehow stood there. The old man's face was deeply wrinkled, expressionless, and his eyes hollow, staring intently at Gu Qingchen. He waved his hand, the movement stiff. Gu Qingchen didn't hesitate and walked over. Since the background said he should act as the groom, this must be the person coming to guide him. When he got close, the old man slightly bowed, his voice dry and hoarse. "Groom, I am the steward of the Nangong Manor. Please follow me, your resting place has been prepared for you." "Thank you." Gu Qingchen nodded, speaking briefly. The old man said no more, turned around, and led the way with the lantern. The white lantern emitted a pale light, illuminating only a small circle beneath their feet. The lantern swayed, and the old man's shadow stretched long on the stone slabs, twisting and distorting. The two of them walked silently on the dead silent street, one in front of the other. Only the sound of footsteps echoed. Clop. 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 After about 10 minutes, a vast ancient mansion appeared in front of them. A tall gate, a large courtyard, and a crimson door, though the color was dull, like dried blood. The copper rings on the door were rusted, and two huge white lanterns hung in front, with black characters on them reading "Double Happiness." White lanterns, black happiness characters. No matter how you looked at it, it felt awkward, carrying a sinister vibe. This atmosphere is amazing, Chinese horror. I got goosebumps. White lanterns, happiness characters? The Nangong family is really strange. The groom seems calm. Probably faking it? He must be scared out of his wits inside. Chapter 2, The Ghost Bride. Her face was delicate but colorless, pale like paper, her eyes swollen, and tears still hanging on her face. She saw Gu Qingchen and seemed startled, quickly jumping down from the railing, lowering her head, and timidly saying, "Jigroom." Gu Qingchen said nothing, only stared at her. The rules said, "Don't respond." The maid, seeing that he didn't speak, seemed even more frightened, her voice carrying a sob. "Jigroom, forgive me. I didn't mean to offend you. I just thought of 3 days later." She didn't finish her sentence, but her meaning was clear. 3 days later, the wedding. Gu Qingchen remained silent. The maid waited for a moment, seeing no reaction from him, she began to sob softly and hurriedly ran past him, disappearing into the dark corridor. Gu Qingchen watched the direction she disappeared, lost in thought. Was this maid part of the rules? Or some kind of trap? He continued walking for a while, confirming that there were no other anomalies in the corridor, before turning back to the guest room. He closed the door tightly. Time passed bit by bit. The night grew deeper. The outside world fell completely silent, an eerie stillness. The light of the oil lamp began to flicker uncertainly. Suddenly. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking sound echoed again. This time, the knocking was soft, gentle, with a hint of hesitation. Gu Qingchen's heart skipped a beat. Rule number 4, if you hear knocking at night, never open the door. You can confirm who is outside through the window gap. If the bride is outside the door, you may open the door. If the butler in new clothes is outside, immediately blow out the oil lamp and pretend to be asleep. He walked to the window again and looked outside through the small hole. This time, outside the door, it was not the woman delivering food, nor the crying maid. It was a figure dressed in bright red bridal clothes. Covered with a red veil, her face could not be seen. But her figure was slender, standing quietly outside the door. A bride? Why is she here now? The wedding isn't until 3 days later. Gu Qingchen hesitated for a moment. The rule says that if the bride is outside, you may open the door. May open the door, not must open the door. This means there is room for choice. Open, or not open. The bride outside seemed to have waited a little too long. She knocked gently on the door again. Tap, tap. The sound was very soft. Gu Qingchen made a decision. He walked to the door, took a deep breath, slowly unlocked the door, and opened it. The bride in bright red bridal clothes stood outside the door, her red veil swaying slightly. A faint, strange fragrance came from her, very pleasant, calming the mind. She did not speak, only quietly looked at Gu Qingchen. Gu Qingchen did not speak either, he stepped aside. The bride took small steps and entered the room. Her movements were light, almost soundless. She walked to the table and sat down quietly. Gu Qingchen closed the door and walked to the table, sitting opposite her. The two sat across from each other, separated by the oil lamp, silent. The red veil obscured her face, only a blurry outline could be seen. Is this the bride? Ghost wife? She looked so normal, except for the outfit and the time she appeared. Rule 6 says she is beautiful, kind, remember, you love her. The atmosphere is so strange, yet so compelling, what's going on? Gu Qingchen is amazing, he really dared to open the door. So calm. If it were me, I would have fainted from fear. Gu Qingchen looked at the bride and suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. Hello. The red veil of the bride moved slightly, as if she did not expect him to greet her first. A soft, slightly ethereal woman's voice came from beneath the veil, husband. Her voice was pleasant, but lacked a bit of vitality. Is there something? Gu Qingchen asked, speaking calmly, as if truly conversing with his newlywed wife. The bride lowered her head slightly. I just wanted to see you. I'm fine. Gu Qingchen replied, thank you. Another silence followed. The oil lamp crackled. The bride seemed a bit at a loss, completely surprised by her husband's response. Too calm, too normal. She hesitated for a moment and softly said, there are many rules in the mansion, husband, you must be careful. I know. Gu Qingchen nodded, I will be careful. The bride raised her hand, her fingers pale and slender, her nails neatly trimmed. She pointed to the white lantern on the table. It is very important, protect it well. When the lamp is alive, the person is alive. Gu Qingchen quoted the rule. The bride seemed to nod slightly, yes. She sat for a while longer, then slowly stood up. I should leave now. Safe travels. Gu Qingchen also stood up. The bride walked toward the door, and Gu Qingchen opened it for her. She stopped outside the door, turned her head slightly, as if wanting to say something, but in the end, she said nothing and silently walked into the dark corridor, her red figure gradually swallowed by the darkness. Gu Qingchen closed the door and locked the bolt. He returned to the table, looking at the white lantern and the flickering oil lamp. The bride's arrival did not seem to bring danger, rather, it highlighted the importance of the lantern. Rule 5, protect your lantern, it is important, when the lamp is alive, the person is alive. Rule 6, your bride is beautiful, kind, remember, you love her. So far, these two rules seem to be correct. At least, the bride showed some goodwill. But this is just the first night. The Dragon Kingdom live chat room was exploding. What the hell? Is this the first meeting? The ghost bride doesn't seem so scary? She's kind of obedient? She called him husband, her voice is so beautiful. What kind of incredible mental strength does Gu Qingchen have? Talking to the ghost bride like having a casual chat. He still said thank you and take care? I was stunned. Is this guy suffering from facial paralysis or is he a big shot? He's so calm, it's terrifying. Did you guys notice? He seems to be constantly observing and analyzing, not speaking much, but everything he says hits the point. Did he get a ridiculously powerful talent? Maybe, but an SSS level talent is so hard to get, no one's had one in years. No matter what, this start is solid. Other livestreams are practically pissing themselves, but ours has a unique vibe. Quick, check out the livestream from the Korean guy, he got matched with a zoo dungeon and got solo killed by a monkey, the stream turned black. Compared to that, our guy is a breath of fresh air. The Dragon Country analysis team has sent a tip. Author's PS, the dungeon the main character is in has never been cleared by anyone else, meaning once this dungeon is finished, it will disappear. Do you get what I mean? Gu Qingchen noticed a small piece of paper suddenly appear on the table. He knew this was a hint provided by the country. Each dungeon only has 3 hints, each with no more than 10 words. Chapter 3, The Red Embroidered Shoes. The white lantern's light remained cold and steady. Outside the window, the thick, inescapable darkness slowly began to fade, turning into a grayish color. It was like the quietest moment before dawn, but you'd never see the sunrise. The sky brightened. Or rather, the day of this dungeon world had arrived. Gu Qingchen sat up from the bed. He hadn't slept the entire night, but his mind was still highly focused. A long life of solitude had trained him to stay alert, and he was used to enduring fatigue. The oil lamp had already gone out. He relit the oil lamp, and the tiny flame brought a bit of warmth, driving away some of the lingering chill from the night. The white lantern still stood quietly on the table, emitting its unchanging white light. He checked again, the candle's flame inside had not changed, as if it could burn forever. The lamp lives as long as I do. He whispered, repeating the rule. Last night's experience was still clear in his mind. The woman who brought food, the crying maid, the bride who visited late at night, and the last one, the butler in new clothes, filled with malice. Each one was a clue. The paper hint from the country also pointed out that there might be contradictions in the rules. He needed to be more proactive in gathering information, but not cross the line. The first rule limited his movements, the western guest room and the corridor outside. He walked to the door and gently opened it. The scene in the corridor was the same as last night, dim, quiet, and empty. The musty smell in the air seemed to have lessened, but the stale wood and dust still clung thickly. He looked at the railing where the maid had been crying last night, but it was empty. He then looked deeper into the corridor. The darkness still lingered there, as though waiting to devour something. There was no abnormality for now. He closed the door and returned to sit at the table, waiting. Waiting for breakfast today, and also for any possible changes. The Dragon Country livestream's morning session has started. Here they come. Let's see how my husband is doing after not seeing him all night. Wake up upstairs, that's the ghost lady's husband. Gushin looks like he didn't sleep well. But he's still handsome. Last night was too scary. That butler's eyes. If it were me, I probably would have pissed myself on the spot, but Gu Qingshan acted like he was still sleeping. His mental fortitude is out of this world. Still, my Chingu is steady, even though it's creepy, it hasn't fallen apart. Not long later, familiar footsteps echoed. Tap tap tap. A knock on the door. Young master, breakfast is ready. It was still that flat, emotionless female voice. Gu Qingshan walked to the window and confirmed it was the woman in grey clothes. Put it at the door. Yes. The woman placed the food box down, and her footsteps faded away. Gu Qingshan opened the door and took the food box. He opened it. A bowl of plain porridge, a dish of pickled vegetables, and a steamed bun. It looked perfectly normal. He carefully searched through the porridge with chopsticks. At the bottom of the porridge, he once again found a few strands of black hair, tangled together. Ha! Gu Qingshan chuckled lightly, his tone unclear whether it was helpless or amused. Without changing his expression, he picked out the hair, placing it with the ones from last night, and then quietly began eating his breakfast. The porridge was warm, the pickled vegetables very salty, and the steamed bun a bit hard. But he ate it all cleanly. Eating again. Eating again. This mental preparation, I give full marks. The hair collector Gu Qingshan? Did he even smile for a moment? Did he think it was fun? We don't understand the interests of big shots. After finishing breakfast, he placed the food box outside the door. He needed to explore but couldn't leave the corridor area. He picked up the white lantern again. Although it was a bit gray outside, not completely dark, Rule 5 emphasized caring for the lantern, so he decided to carry it with him. He walked out of the guest room, slowly along the corridor. During the day, the visibility in the corridor was a little higher, but it still seemed endless. The doors of the guest rooms on both sides remained tightly closed. He reached the spot where he had met the maid last night and carefully checked the railing and the ground. There were no special marks. He continued walking forward, toward the direction the maid had fled in last night. After walking about 20 or 30 meters, the corridor turned a corner. After the turn, a small staircase leading to the courtyard appeared on one side, but it was blocked by a low wooden gate with an old lock hanging on it. Rule 1 stated that the activity range is limited to the corridor and the courtyard cannot be entered. He gazed through the fence into the courtyard. A withered tree, wild grass, a rockery, and utter silence. Nothing seemed particularly noteworthy. He was about to turn and leave when his gaze swept over the corner of the courtyard behind the rockery. There, it seemed to reveal a different color. He squinted and looked carefully. It seemed like a shoe? A red embroidered shoe was lying in the shadow behind the rockery, barely visible. The rules didn't say he couldn't look at the courtyard, just that he couldn't enter. He glanced a few more times, remembered the location, and then nonchalantly turned away, continuing to explore along the corridor. Further down the corridor, he reached the end. A circular moon gate blocked the way, behind it a deeper courtyard, but the entrance was also obscured by heavy curtains, making it impossible to see inside. Next to the moon gate stood a wooden plaque. The plaque had words written on it. Private area, outsiders stop here. This was probably the boundary of the range. Gu Qingshan did not try to lift the curtain. Rules were rules, and until he figured out whether he could break them, he wouldn't try it easily. He held the lantern and returned along the same path. After walking around, he had a rough understanding of the structure of the West Wing corridor. The length, the turns, the obstacles, the blind spots in the view. When passing his guest room door, he paused for a moment. Then, he walked in the other direction of the corridor, the direction the butler had left last night. This direction didn't go far. After about 10 meters, a wall blocked the way, with a locked door on the wall, seemingly leading to another courtyard or outside the residence. Exploration complete. The information was limited. He returned to his guest room and closed the door. Now, the known anomalies were a few: the hair in the meals every day, the possible appearance of the bride and the strange butler at night, and the strange embroidered shoe in the courtyard. The embroidered shoe was not mentioned in the rules. Was it a trap? Or a clue? Touching objects outside the rules was risky. But he had talent. Rule collapse could actively break a known rule. Which rule to break? The first rule limiting the range of activity? What would be the cost? just to pick up a shoe? It didn't seem worth it. Maybe there was a safer way. He thought of the bride. Rule 6 said the bride was kind, and her behavior last night indeed showed a hint of kindness, even reminding him again of the importance of the lantern. Maybe he could try to get information from her? But how to contact her? The rules didn't say. Could he only wait for her to visit again? Chapter 4, The Lake in the East Courtyard. The clues seemed to be connecting a little. The maid was still crying intermittently. He was saying some vague words. Gu Qingchen decided to take a bit of risk. He coughed softly. The crying and muttering outside the door suddenly stopped. The maid quickly turned around, her face full of panic, looking at the door of the guest room. Who is in there? Her voice was trembling. Gu Qingchen didn't open the door, just spoke through it, his voice calm. It's me. Master? The maid was startled, quickly jumping down from the railing, looking at the door in a panic. You're inside? I didn't know. You just mentioned the lake in the east courtyard? Gu Qingchen asked directly. The maid's face instantly turned pale, even paler than before, her eyes filled with fear. No. I didn't say anything. She shook her head desperately. Master, you heard wrong. You can't go to the east courtyard. Absolutely can't go. Her reaction was extreme. Why can't I go? Gu Qingchen continued asking. The rules. The rules of the mansion. The maid retreated in panic. I can't say anymore. I must leave. She looked like a frightened rabbit, turning around and running, almost tripping on her own skirt, stumbling away. Gu Qingchen didn't call her back. That was enough. He confirmed that there was a lake in the east courtyard, and it was extremely dangerous. This also indirectly confirmed that the death of the young lady, the bride, might be related to the lake. The maid's reaction didn't seem like a disguise, that fear was very real. So, the embroidered shoe in the courtyard. Could it be related to the bride? The red embroidered shoe. The bride wore a bright red wedding dress last night, but her head was covered, so it was unclear what shoe she wore. If the shoe belonged to the bride, why did it fall behind the rockery in the courtyard? The rockery was not far from the locked fence door leading to the courtyard. A plan slowly formed in Gu Qingchen's mind. It was a little risky, but worth trying. He needed a tool. In the evening, the woman delivering dinner arrived. Gu Qingchen still had her leave it at the door. When he took the food box back, he paid special attention. The food box was made of wood, with a thick hemp rope wrapped around the handle for fastening. He quickly finished his dinner, then began to dismantle the food box's handle. He was very careful, not damaging the box itself, just removing the hemp rope completely. The hemp rope was about a meter long, strong enough. He carefully kept the hemp rope. Next, it was time to wait for the night to fall completely. The oil lamp became the main light source again. The white lantern quietly stayed beside him. Gu Qingchen sat at the table, stroking the hemp rope in his hands, closing his eyes to rest and patiently waiting. Time passed. The sky outside turned from dull gray to pitch black. The night deepened. The mansion was eerily silent. Perhaps the bride wouldn't come tonight? Or maybe it's not time yet? Gu Qingchen stood up and picked up the white lantern. He gently opened the door. The corridor was pitch black, only the lantern in his hand emitting a pale white glow. He walked to the low fence door leading to the courtyard. The gap in the fence was very small, his hand couldn't pass through. But he had the rope. He took out the hemp rope, tied a slip knot at one end, making a simple noose. Then, he carefully slipped the rope through the gap in the fence door, aiming it at the position where he remembered the red embroidered shoe. Once, he missed. Twice, he missed. 3 times. Finally, the noose caught the embroidered shoe. He gently pulled the rope, tightening the loop. Slowly, carefully, he dragged the red embroidered shoe out from behind the rockery, through the overgrown grass, and pulled it under the fence door. Then, through the gap at the bottom, he successfully retrieved the shoe. The whole process went smoothly without any accidents. He picked up the embroidered shoe. It was a delicate red satin embroidered shoe, with a pattern of mandarin ducks playing in the water stitched in golden thread, small and exquisite. But on the shoe's surface, there were some dark dried stains, which looked like water stains and mud stains. And there was a faint, almost imperceptible fishy smell, like the scent of a pond. Gu Qingchen carefully examined the shoe. At the moment he picked up the shoe, a figure suddenly appeared in the dark corridor behind him, without warning. Silent. Wearing a bright red bridal dress, covered by a red veil. It was the bride. She had come. She quietly watched Gu Qingchen, and the red embroidered shoe in his hand. Gu Qingchen felt the gaze from behind and slowly turned around. He saw the bride, and was not too surprised. He handed the embroidered shoe to her, his tone calm. Is this yours? The bride did not move, nor did she speak. The red veil slightly swayed. After several seconds, her drifting voice softly sounded, Did you go to the lake in the east courtyard? No. Gu Qingchen shook his head and pointed toward the courtyard behind the fence. I found it behind the rockery over there. I pulled it over with a rope. The bride seemed to let out a slight breath of relief. She slowly raised her hand, her white fingers gently touching the embroidered shoe, especially the dried stains. Her voice carried an extremely complicated emotion, as if sadness, yet also nostalgia. It's been lying there for a long time. Thank you for finding it for me. She took the embroidered shoe, carefully cradling it in her hands. You're welcome. Gu Qingchen replied. The two fell silent again. The bride, holding the shoe, seemed to fall into some kind of memory. Gu Qingchen did not urge her. After a while, the bride softly spoke, as if reminding, yet also warning, there are many places in the manor you should not go, many things you should not listen to. Like the lake in the east courtyard? Gu Qingchen asked. The bride's body seemed to tremble slightly. She responded softly, that place is not good. I understand. Gu Qingchen nodded. The bride seemed to want to say something else, but in the end, only gave a slight nod. I should leave now. Be careful with the lantern. After saying this, her figure floated backward, as if merging with the darkness, quickly disappearing. Gu Qingchen stood still, watching the direction where the bride had vanished. Tonight's meeting brought even more information. The bride confirmed the shoe was hers, and she showed obvious fear and avoidance towards the lake in the east courtyard. That place is not good. And she reminded him again to be careful with the lantern. The lantern was important, but careful of what? Careful not to let it go out? Or something else? He returned to the guest room and closed the door. Tonight, would the butler come again, dressed in new clothes? He blew out the oil lamp, leaving only the light from the white lantern, then lay on the bed fully clothed, pretending to sleep. Time passed second by second. Outside, it was completely silent. Not knowing how long had passed. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking sounded again. Strong and urgent. Young master. Young master, open the door quickly. Chapter 5, The Third Day. The morning of the third day arrived in complete silence. Gray light filtered through the window paper, diluting the darkness in the room, but it couldn't disperse the cold, eerie air. Gu Qingchen opened his eyes. He had slept lightly through the night, but his mind felt like a bowstring pulled tight. It was the last day. The wedding day. He sat up, his eyes first falling on the table. The white lantern was still standing there, its flame silent, as if unchanged since time began. Be careful with the lantern. The bride's warning echoed in his ears. Be careful of what? It seemed harmless, even his only stable light source and protection. Rule number 5, the lantern stays as long as the person does. He needed more information. Longwa live stream morning segment, high viewership. The third day. Wedding day. Excited. Chen Gu is awake. Looks as calm as ever. I'm so nervous, the last day is definitely the hardest to endure. Wonder if the wedding night will be broadcasted. Can this even be shown? You two upstairs are thinking nonsense. Other live streams are unbearable. Asan's ascetic monk seems to be about to collapse, shaking all the time. Still, my Chen Gu is as steady as an old dog. Betting 50 cents, today something big will definitely happen. Familiar footsteps. Knock, knock, knock. Young master, breakfast is served. The process was the same. Porridge, pickles, steamed buns. And the few long black hairs at the bottom of the porridge bowl. Gu Qingchen remained unfazed as he picked out the hairs and placed them with the ones he had collected earlier. There was already a small pile on the table. He quietly finished his breakfast. Just as he put down his bowl and chopsticks, a different sound of footsteps came from outside the corridor. They were very steady, even with a hint of deliberate solemnity in their pace. Gu Qingchen walked to the window and peered through a small hole. It was the butler. He had changed back into his dark-colored robe, and the wrinkles on his face seemed to have smoothed out a bit, his expression returning to its original emptiness. He was holding a stack of bright red clothes. Master. The butler stood outside the door, his voice dry but no longer urgent. The auspicious time is approaching. Please change into your wedding attire. The butler in his dark-colored robe. Rule number 3, the butler is trustworthy, but only when wearing his dark-colored robe. Gu Qingchen paused for a second, then opened the door. The butler held the stack of red clothes and slightly bowed. Master, this is the wedding attire prepared for you. Please change inside your room. At the hour of the snake, I will come to escort you to the hall. Gu Qingchen took the clothes. They were cold and smooth to the touch, made of fine satin, with intricate dragon and phoenix patterns embroidered in gold thread on a bright red background. They were extraordinarily luxurious.
Thank you for your trouble. Gu Qingchen nodded. You are too kind, master. The butler bowed again. Please be sure to be on time.
After speaking, he turned and left with his steady steps. Gu Qingchen closed the door and laid the wedding attire on the bed to unfold it. It was a complete set of groom's clothing, a red robe, red pants, and even red boots. The size seemed to be just right. He picked up the top and carefully examined it. The clothes were brand new, emitting a faint camphor smell, as if they had just been taken out of a box. The stitching was fine, the embroidery exquisite, with no loose threads or flaws to be found. But when he flipped the inner collar, his movements paused for a moment. There, in darker red silk thread, were embroidered a few small characters. The writing was very small, requiring careful attention to read. When the lamp goes out, the person dies.
Gu Qingchen's eyes suddenly sharpened. When the lamp goes out, the person dies? Rule number 5 is when the lamp is there, the person is there. But the wedding attire here was embroidered with when the lamp goes out, the person dies? Is this the contradiction that the country warned about? Which one is true? Or, are they both true, just in different contexts? When the lamp is there, the person is there might emphasize the importance of the lantern, that it cannot be lost or damaged. And when the lamp goes out, the person dies, could it mean that, at certain moments, the lantern must be extinguished? Or, once the lantern goes out, something terrifying will happen? Be careful with the lantern. The bride's warning echoed once again. Is it the lantern itself they need to be careful of? Or is it not letting the lantern go out? Or should they be careful with the state the lantern is in when it is lit? The information is confusing and unclear. Gu Qingchen took a deep breath, suppressing the doubts in his heart. He placed the wedding attire aside, not changing into it immediately. He needed to wait. Wait for the so-called auspicious time. He sat at the table, his fingers unconsciously tapping on the surface, his gaze shifting back and forth between the oil lamp and the white lantern. Time slowly passed. Outside, the sky seemed a bit brighter, but it was still hazy. Occasionally, very faint footsteps could be heard in the corridor, likely other servants passing by, but no one approached his door. Finally, near the hour of the snake, around 10 a.m., the sound of the butler's voice came from outside the corridor, still in the same flat, emotionless tone. Master, the time has come. Please change into your wedding attire and follow me to the hall. Gu Qingchen stood up. He took the wedding attire and quickly put it on. The clothes fit perfectly, as if tailored just for him. The bright red color made his pale face look even more eerily alive. He took one last look at the white lantern. After a second of hesitation, he extended his hand, trying to blow it out. The flame of the white lantern remained completely still. That faint pale light was incredibly stable, and it couldn't be blown out at all. Sure enough. This lantern was not an ordinary object, it could not be extinguished just by wanting it to go out. So, when the lamp goes out, the person dies warning likely does not refer to the literal extinguishing of the flame, but perhaps to losing it? Or some change in its state? He picked up the white lantern. No matter what, rule number 5, when the lamp is there, the person is there, still held true, and he had to carry it with him. He opened the door. The butler, dressed in dark clothes, stood outside the door. Seeing him come out, he slightly bowed and said, "Young master, please follow this old servant." The butler turned and led the way, heading towards the deep part of the corridor, toward the moon gate with a sign that said, "Private area, outsiders, please stop." Gu Qingchen held a white lantern, following closely behind the butler. This time, the butler directly lifted the heavy curtain of the moon gate. Behind the door was a darker, longer corridor. Some blurred portraits hung on the walls on either side, their faces unclear, and the fragrance in the air was stronger, the same fragrance as the bride's perfume. But here, the fragrance was mixed with the smell of decaying wood. At the end of the corridor, faint red candlelight flickered, and there were soft whispers, as if many people were speaking quietly. The butler's steps did not falter. Gu Qingchen followed closely behind, highly focused, observing everything around him. As they passed the middle of the corridor, his peripheral vision seemed to catch a glimpse of something. The eyes in a portrait on the right wall moved slightly. He quickly turned his head to look. The portrait was of an elderly man wearing ancient official robes. His face was blurry, but those eyes seemed to be slowly turning, looking at the white lantern in his hand. Gu Qingchen immediately looked away, maintaining a neutral expression as he continued forward. Was it an illusion? Or had the things in this mansion begun to stir? Chapter 6, The High Seats Are Set. The whispers grew closer. Finally, they reached the end of the corridor. Suddenly, the view ahead opened up. A hall decorated in an extremely festive manner appeared in front of them. The hall was filled with red silk cloths and auspicious characters, and red candles burned brightly on their candle holders, casting the entire hall in a crimson glow. However, the hall was densely packed with people sitting. They wore ancient clothes, men and women, old and young, with pale faces, expressionless, their stiff bodies sitting motionless in chairs. They did not speak, and the whispers seemed to come from far away, or perhaps from within their bodies. Their eyes were all hollow, gazing at the entrance of the hall, at Gu Qingchen. The entire scene was extremely festive yet eerily silent, bizarre to the extreme. Is this the wedding hall? Are these the guests? Gu Qingchen felt that the white lantern in his hand had grown even colder. The butler led him to a spot in the front of the hall. Young master, please wait here. After speaking, the butler stepped aside, blending into the stiff guests around him. Gu Qingchen stood still. In front of him was a high platform covered with red cloth, with 2 empty grand chairs placed on top. They must be for the high-ranking guests. But on his left and right, those pale guests, their heads seemed to move slightly, following his movements, their hollow gazes always focused on him. The pressure was enormous. His sense of reason seemed to be slowly dwindling, and a strange feeling of anxiety and fear began to grow inside him. Gu Qingchen took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He gripped the handle of the white lantern tightly, the cold touch keeping him awake. He noticed that although these guests were all watching him, their gazes seemed to be more focused on the white lantern in his hand. Their eyes seemed to hold an indescribable longing? Or perhaps fear? Time passed, minute by minute. The grand chairs on the high platform remained empty. The bride had not appeared. The surrounding whispers seemed to grow louder, like countless people whispering in his ear, the words unclear, but causing a great deal of discomfort. The bodies of the pale guests seemed to lean forward slightly. The atmosphere grew more suffocating. At this moment, the white lantern in Gu Qingchen's hand, the pale flame that had been burning steadily, suddenly shook violently. As if an invisible wind had blown through. The flame flickered wildly, unstable. At the same time, the red candlelight in the entire hall. The shaking started violently. Light and shadow intertwined, and the entire festive hall instantly became filled with ghostly shadows. The pale guests suddenly stood up in unison. For the first time, expressions appeared on their faces. It was the purest greed and hunger. They opened their mouths and let out a silent scream, slowly and stiffly closing in on Gu Qingchen. Be careful with the lantern. The bride's warning exploded in his mind. If the lantern goes out, will the people vanish too? The rules were collapsing. Which rule was being broken? In a flash of lightning, Gu Qingchen made a decision. He couldn't let himself be surrounded, he had to break the deadlock. The target, rule number 1, activity range limitation. Perhaps leaving the hall could break the deadlock. But just as he was about to activate his talent, a red figure suddenly appeared between him and the high platform, as if teleported. In a red wedding gown, with a red veil. It was the bride. She turned her back to Gu Qingchen, facing those strange guests who were closing in. She raised both hands, and the large sleeves of her wedding gown hung down. A cold aura spread out from her as the center. The guests closing in suddenly froze in their movements. The greed and hunger on their faces immediately turned into fear, and they began to slowly retreat. The bride slowly turned her head, the red veil facing Gu Qingchen, her voice hurried and clear, "Husband, the lantern. Cover it." Cover the lantern? Not extinguish it? Gu Qingchen reacted quickly and immediately tore off the large hem of his ceremonial gown, forcefully covering the white lantern completely. The light was completely blocked. The moment the lantern was fully covered, all the red candlelight shaking in the hall instantly stabilized. The guests who had been retreating now had their expressions return to emptiness and numbness. They stiffly turned around and slowly sat back in their seats. It was as though the terrifying scene just now had never happened. Deathly silence returned. Only the rapid beating of Gu Qingchen's heart, and the lantern that was covered but still emitted a faint pale glow, could be heard. The bride's figure seemed to waver slightly after he covered the lantern, growing faint. She sighed softly, her voice a bit tired. "It's okay, for now, no more danger." She turned towards Gu Qingchen, her red veil swaying slightly. "They just crave light. Especially, the light of your lantern. But you must not let them touch it." Gu Qingchen slowly loosened the garment covering the lantern, and the pale light re-emerged, though it seemed slightly weaker than before. He looked at the bride. "Thank you. When we pay our respects, be careful," the bride whispered, her figure gradually fading as if merging with the red candlelight, disappearing without a trace. Gu Qingchen stood there, reflecting on the heart-stopping moment and the bride's words. Craving light? But they must not touch it? So, be careful with the lantern meant that the light of the lantern attracted those things? And if the lantern goes out, people go out might mean that if the lantern is touched and taken away by those things, in some sense extinguished, he would die for sure? Then while the lantern lives, so does the person. Makes perfect sense. The logic seems to be sorted out. But this is just a guess. The wedding has not yet officially begun. The grand hall has not yet arrived. The real ceremony, perhaps, is the greatest test. He straightened the hem of his ceremonial gown that had been torn, holding the faintly glowing white lantern, and continued to stand still, waiting. His expression remained calm, as if he was not the one who had almost been torn apart. Damn, that scared me to death. Those things stood up, and I thought the banquet was starting. The bride is so powerful. Brother Chen reacted so fast, covering the lantern, that was a genius move. Damn, this wedding is way too intense. So the lantern is both bait and a protective charm? This dungeon is designed in such a tricky way. Brother Chen's psychological quality, I admire it. Information from the Dragon Kingdom analysis team came again. A piece of paper fluttered down. Gu Qingchen caught it. It read, "The ceremony may be the key, be cautious with your words and actions." Just as he had thought. He crushed the note and cast his gaze toward the empty high platform. At that moment, the curtain on the side of the hall was lifted. Two figures, surrounded by a group of servants with their heads lowered, slowly walked out. Chapter 7, Cold Night. Gu Qingchen's expression remained calm as he raised the wine ladle, the wide sleeves of his ceremonial robe naturally hanging down, just enough to cover most of his arm and the lower half of the ladle. At the same moment the bride also raised her wine ladle. Gu Qingchen's wrist suddenly twitched and turned. The movement was so quick it was almost invisible. Half of the thick, cold liquor was silently poured into the wide sleeve of his robe. The liquor soaked through the inner sleeve, cold to the bone, but his face showed no sign of change. Then, he raised his hand and drank the remaining half of the wine in one go. As the liquor slid down his throat, an indescribable chill followed, as if he had swallowed a piece of ice, immediately followed by a strange burning sensation, a clash of cold and fire. The taste was even more peculiar, sweet and greasy with a rusty, fishy scent, making him want to gag. But not a single wrinkle appeared on his brow. Across from him, the bride also drank her wine. Her movement was elegant, it was hard to tell if she had tampered with it too. After finishing their wine, the two placed their ladles back onto the tray. The old servant, head lowered, quickly retreated with the tray. On the high platform, the cold gazes of the master and madam seemed to soften, returning to their hollow state. The butler took a step forward, send the newlyweds to the bridal chamber. The ceremony seemed to be complete. Yet, Gu Qingchen dared not relax even for a moment. The wedding wine was indeed problematic. Though he only drank half, the strange feeling of cold and fire still lingered in his body, making him slightly dizzy. The bridal chamber? Was there more? He focused his mind, noticing that the bride's body seemed to wobble ever so slightly. She communicated with him telepathically, reminding him that she must have known the wine was tampered with. Did she drink it? Or did she pour it out too? The butler led the way toward the other exit of the hall. Gu Qingchen and the bride followed side by side. The surrounding guests remained stiff, eyes lowered, watching them leave. They stepped out of the hall into another dimly lit corridor. This corridor was narrower than the one they came from, and the walls seemed to have some blurred murals, the details unclear, but the colors were dull, giving off an ominous feeling. The butler silently led the way, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. After about 2 or 3 minutes, a door covered in red wedding characters appeared ahead. The butler stopped in front of the door, stepped aside, and said, "Young master, miss, the bridal chamber is here. A moment of spring night is worth 1,000 gold. Old servant will take his leave." After speaking, he bowed once more, then turned and left, disappearing quickly into the dark end of the corridor. Only Gu Qingchen and the bride remained standing in front of the door covered in red wedding characters. The atmosphere was momentarily stiff. Entering the bridal chamber with a ghost bride? This was an experience like no other. Gu Qingchen paused for a moment, extended his hand, and pushed open the door. Creak, the door opened with a sound. Inside was a dazzling red. Red candles, red curtains, red bedding, red window decorations. The strong scent hit him like a wave, the same as the bride's scent, but here it was several times more intense, almost overpowering. The room was large, luxuriously decorated, yet there was an inexplicable sense of oldness, as if everything had been set up decades ago and had never been changed. The bride walked in first. Gu Qingchen followed, closing the door behind him. As soon as the door closed, it seemed to shut out everything from the outside. Inside the room were only the two of them and the crackling red candles. The bride walked to the vanity table by the bed, facing away from him, speaking softly. Her voice was still faint, but with a trace of barely detectable fatigue. "Husband, we're safe for now." Gu Qingchen walked to the table and gently placed the white lantern he had been holding onto the table. The light from the lantern seemed weak in the full red glow of the room. "What was up with that wine?" he asked directly. The bride remained silent for a moment, then slowly said, "The wedding wine is not of this world."
Once it is consumed, it will gradually assimilate, becoming a part of this mansion, just like the guests outside.
Gu Qingchen's eyes flickered slightly.
Indeed, once it was drunk, one would become one of those ghostly things.
Did you drink it? He asked. The bride gently shook her head, the red veil swaying along with it. I need not drink anymore. She was a ghost, already a part of this mansion? Why remind me? Gu Qingchen looked at her back.
The bride slowly turned around. Although her face was hidden by the veil, Gu Qingchen could feel her gaze.
You are my husband. Her voice was very soft. Once we have married and drunk the wedding wine, we are truly husband and wife. In this Nangua mansion, we should help each other. Help each other?
Gu Qingchen looked at the bride with the red veil in front of him, quickly weighing his thoughts. Since entering the copy, she had indeed offered help multiple times. Though her identity was strange, so far, her goodwill seemed to outweigh her malice. Especially the voice transmission during the wedding ceremony, which was crucial. In this eerie Nangua mansion, having more allies was better than having more enemies.
Thank you. Gu Qingchen nodded. What should I do next?
According to the process, wasn't it time to lift the veil? But he wasn't sure of the ghost bride's customs. The bride seemed to hesitate for a moment, lowering her head slightly, her hands nervously twisting together.
Husband, may you lift my wedding veil? Her voice carried an almost imperceptible shyness and nervousness. Gu Qingchen froze for a moment. She really wanted him to lift the veil?
He looked toward the vanity, where a jade rui, entwined with red silk, was placed. It seemed to be used for lifting the veil.
He walked over and picked up the jade rui. It felt warm and smooth to the touch. He approached the bride.
The bride stood quietly, motionless. Only the edge of her red veil quivered slightly, revealing her unsettled emotions. Gu Qingchen extended his hand, gently using one end of the jade rui to lift the large red veil.
The movement was slow.
The veil gradually lifted. First revealed was a smooth, fair chin, then the delicate red lips, a straight, elegant nose.
Finally, the veil completely slipped off. A face appeared before Gu Qingchen's eyes. Gu Qingchen instinctively held his breath for a moment. Not because it was terrifying. Quite the opposite. The face beneath the veil was extremely beautiful.
Her skin was like snow, her brows and eyes like a painting, her lips like crimson dots. It was a beauty with a classical charm. But her face was too pale, lacking color, and her eyes. Her eyes were large, black, and bright, like obsidian soaked in mercury, clear yet bottomless, filled with a non-human purity and tranquility. At this moment, those beautiful eyes blinked slightly, long lashes fluttering like butterfly wings, showing a trace of timidity and shyness, unwilling to meet Gu Qingchen's gaze. She slightly turned her face, a faint, almost invisible blush rising on her ear.
I am Nangua Wan.
Her voice was like a mosquito's whisper, softly stating her name.
Gu Qingchen came to his senses.
Well, this ghost bride's beauty indeed lived up to rule number 6, your bride is beautiful.
Gu Qingchen slept lightly.
Beside him lay a female ghost wife, who, even though she was stunningly beautiful and seemed to have good intentions, he could not truly relax in the core of an S-rank ghost story. The red candles had burned all night, their solidified red wax dripping down, and the rich fragrance in the air seemed to settle, no longer as overpowering. He could feel that Nangua Wan remained still as well, as though she did not need to breathe, nearly an exquisite doll. But the corner of the mandarin duck blanket that covered him carried a slight chill, different from the fragrance. He didn't know how much time had passed, but the eternal grayish sky outside seemed to have brightened slightly.
Dawn had arrived. Gu Qingchen opened his eyes, immediately looking to his side.
Nangua Wan had already woken up, or perhaps, she had never slept at all. She lay on her side, quietly watching him. In her obsidian-like eyes, emotions were complex. Seeing him awake, she immediately hurriedly shifted her gaze, a faint blush appearing on her pale face that was almost invisible. Husband, you're awake, she said softly, her voice carrying the gentle sweetness of just waking up.
Morning.
Gu Qingchen sat up, stretching his stiff shoulders.
Sleeping in clothes wasn't comfortable.
Nangong Wan also sat up, her bridal gown still smooth and flawless, without a single wrinkle. The two of them were silent for a moment, the atmosphere suddenly awkward. Good morning everyone, the post-wedding night livestream starts now.
It looks calm? Nothing too indescribable happened? Disappointed.
I was hoping for some tragic love story with a ghost. Wake up, upstairs, this is a horror livestream. But the ghost bride's shy little expression, I ship it.
Brother Chun seems a bit uncomfortable? Haha, rare. The point isn't what happened, isn't today the wedding's second day? Soon, a knock on the door broke the silence. Knock knock knock. Son-in-law, miss, please get up and freshen up, later you'll need to serve tea to the master and mistress.
The butler's voice came from outside, still in the same flat tone under his dark-colored robe.
Serve tea? Got it. Gu Qingchen responded. Footsteps faded outside the door. Nangong explained softly, it's the tradition. On the morning after the wedding, we must serve tea to the elders as a sign of filial piety. Gu Qingchen nodded, tradition, again with the traditions. The rules of the Nangong family seemed to seep into every corner. The two of them got out of bed. The water basin and towels for freshening up had already been placed on the rack by the door at some unknown time. The water was cold, and the towel was rough. After a quick wash, Gu Qingchen looked at Nangong, this tea. He was worried the tea might be as problematic as the bridal wine. Nangong shook her head slightly, the tea should be fine, it's just when serving tea, be careful with your words and actions. Father and mother, their moods are unpredictable. Unpredictable moods? Gu Qingchen took note of this. They dressed, and the two of them walked out of the bridal chamber, one after the other. The butler was indeed waiting outside, leading them toward the hall from yesterday. The hall's decoration remained the same, with the red candles still burning brightly. The pale guests were still sitting stiffly in their original places, their hollow eyes slowly following the movement of the two. On the high platform, Old Master Nangong and his wife were already seated, still like statues, wearing dark red ancient attire with lifeless expressions. The butlers signaled for them to stand before the platform. An old servant approached with a tea tray, which held 2 green porcelain teacups. Gu Qingchen and Nangong each took one. The butler announced, the newlyweds offer tea. Gu Qingchen stepped forward, walking to Old Master Nangong. He slightly bowed, lifting the teacup over his head, Father, please have some tea. Old Master Nangong's hollow eyes slowly moved downward, landing on the teacup, then slowly lifted again, resting on Gu Qingchen's face. That gaze was cold and piercing, filled with a sense of scrutiny and indifference. After several seconds, a withered, wrinkled hand, covered in age spots, slowly lifted and took the teacup. He didn't drink it, just held the cup in his hand, his gaze still fixed on Gu Qingchen. Gu Qingchen's face remained calm as he stepped back to his original position. Next, Nangong stepped forward and offered tea to Madame Nangong. Mother, please have some tea. Madame Nangong's reaction was even slower, her thick powdered face expressionless, her vacant eyes staring ahead. After almost 10 seconds of holding the teacup, she slowly raised her hand and took the cup. Again, she didn't drink it, just holding it. The atmosphere was oppressively heavy. The elders didn't drink the tea. Was the ritual completed? The butler seemed to pause for a moment before continuing, the ritual. Just as he was about to announce the completion of the ritual, Old Master Nangong's withered hand trembled violently. Snap! The green porcelain teacup slipped from his hand and shattered on the ground. Hot tea splashed everywhere, tea leaves and porcelain shards scattered across the floor. The entire hall's atmosphere dropped to freezing point. The hollow-eyed guests all. In a flash, all attention was drawn to Gu Qingchen. In those hollow eyes, cold malice and killing intent filled them in an instant. Old Master Nangong's hollow eyes locked onto Gu Qingchen, his withered lips twisted, making a hoarse sound like bones grinding. Tea, too hot. Preposterous. Disrespectful. Must be punished. The murmurs around them started again, this time filled with clear malice and accusations. The butler stood quietly to the side, head lowered, silent, as if he had seen nothing. Nangong's face turned pale in an instant, her eyes darting desperately towards Gu Qingchen, full of panic and worry. Damn. A trap. This is definitely intentional. Gu Qingchen's heart sank sharply. He knew it wasn't that simple. This old ghost deliberately broke the teacup to frame him for serving tea improperly. How come I didn't feel it was hot? Damn, were they just waiting those few seconds to figure out how to kill me? What should I do? Argue? Reason with this strange presence? Resist? The guests around seemed ready to pounce at any moment. Use my talent? Which rule would that break? In the blink of an eye, Gu Qingchen reacted. Instead of panic, a slight, just right look of fear and guilt appeared on his face. He suddenly stepped forward, not retreating, but squatting directly, disregarding the shards of porcelain on the ground. He quickly gathered the pieces with his hands, speaking in an urgent and sincere tone. Father, forgive me, it was my neglect, I didn't test the temperature before serving, disturbing you. I will clean up right now and make you a new cup. His actions were swift, and his tone was as sincere as could be, as if it were truly all his fault. This move of his immediately halted the killing intent that had frozen the scene. The guests who had been ready to move seemed to freeze. A faint hint of surprise seemed to flash in Old Master Nangong's hollow eyes. Could this little kid be so patient? Not only did he not argue or show fear, but he also immediately admitted fault and took responsibility, even wanting to clean up the mess himself? Chapter 9, Unknown Nails. The room was silent, only the occasional faint crackling sound from the red candles burning. Gu Qingchen sat at the table, his fingers unconsciously tapping the surface. Nangong Wan had gone deeper into the corridor, where the light grew dimmer, as if leading to even more mysterious areas of the mansion. Her so-called visit to Mother was probably not just a simple greeting. Time passed slowly. Finally, the familiar sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. It wasn't the butler's steady steps, nor the quiet footsteps of the maid delivering food, but a slower, more hesitant sound. Gu Qingchen walked to the window and looked through a small gap. It was the crying maid in pink, carrying a food box that was larger than usual, her head lowered, walking slowly, and her face still bearing traces of undried tears. She stopped outside the door but didn't knock. Instead, she stood there, her shoulders slightly trembling, and started crying again. Gu Qingchen waited a few seconds. Seeing that she didn't move, he took the initiative to speak, put it at the door. The maid outside was startled, her crying stopping abruptly, like a frightened rabbit. She hurriedly responded, "Yes, yes, sir." In a panic, she set the food box down but didn't leave immediately. "Is there something else?" Gu Qingchen asked through the door. The maid's voice was shaky, with a hint of fear, stuttering as she spoke. The butler said, "For lunch today, please, sir, make sure to taste it carefully, especially the soup. It was specially prepared by the lady for you, to help your health." After speaking, she seemed terribly afraid. Without waiting for Gu Qingchen to respond, her footsteps hurriedly retreated. "Soup specially prepared by the lady?" Gu Qingchen furrowed his brows. After the life-threatening tea incident, this sudden concern seemed particularly suspicious. He opened the door and brought the food box inside. The food box felt heavier than usual. Opening the lid, inside was still the usual 2 dishes and a bowl of rice, but there was also a delicate ceramic soup bowl, its lid tightly sealed, along with a bowl of rice piled high. The dishes looked more sumptuous than usual. Besides the green vegetables, there was even a plate of braised pork, glistening and tempting. But one could easily guess that it must contain some added ingredients. His gaze fell upon the stewing pot. Was it specially instructed by Madame? He carefully lifted the lid of the stewing pot. A rich, strange fragrance instantly wafted out, different from ordinary food aromas, and not the faint scent of Nangong Wan, but a mix of herbs, meat, and some indescribable fishy smell. The soup was clear and bright, slightly glimmering with a golden sheen, revealing the ingredients simmering within. Several pieces of meat with skin, a few red dates, some slices of ginseng, and some unfamiliar root herbs. It looked like a bowl of nourishing soup. But in this strange Nangong mansion, the more something appeared normal and nourishing, the more problematic it likely was. Gu Qingchen picked up the soup spoon and gently stirred the pot. The spoon touched something solid at the bottom. He scooped a spoonful of soup, blew on it, brought it to his mouth, but did not drink, just carefully sniffed it instead. The aroma was rich, but the faint fishy scent couldn't be entirely covered. He set down the spoon and used chopsticks to push aside the oil layer and ingredients on the surface, carefully looking at the bottom of the pot. Amidst the herbs and meat chunks, he saw something else. It was not hair, but rather a few pieces extremely fine, translucent things, resembling a fingernail. As thin as a cicada's wing, soaked in the soup, nearly undetectable unless observed closely. Gu Qingchen's expression instantly turned cold. Specially prepared nourishing soup by Madame? What exactly was being nourished? The malice in this Nangong mansion is truly pervasive and ever-changing. He expressionlessly put the lid back on the stewing pot. He would not touch the soup even a single sip. But the maid's words were still ringing in his ears, "Do make sure to savor it." This was likely a hidden rule. Refusing the gift of the high hall might have consequences worse than spilling tea. Just pouring it out? That might not work either. He had to think of a way to deal with it. He looked at the white lantern. Food. Could the ingredients in this bowl of soup also be considered food? It seemed a bit absurd, but if hair could burn, then perhaps these fingernail pieces could too? Worth a try. He first finished eating the normal food, as usual picking out the long black hair inside and setting it aside. Then, he opened the stewing pot again. He took a soup spoon and carefully ladled out the soup, pouring it into the rice bowl. The rice had already been eaten, and the bowl was empty. He only poured the soup, trying to avoid the solid ingredients. Soon, the pot was left with the stewed meat, herbs, and those few strange, translucent fingernails. He picked up the hair he had collected earlier and mixed it with these dried goods. Then, he took the soup spoon and carefully pushed the mixed ingredients towards the flame of the white lantern. On the first attempt, a piece of fingernail approached the flame. Sizzle. A faint sound made, and the fingernail instantly curled and charred, turning into a wisp of smoke lighter than hair burning, merging into the flame. The glow of the white lantern seemed to flicker slightly, the brightness increasing a bit, and even from that pale flame, there seemed to emerge a hint of very light gold. Effective. And the effect seemed even better than hair. Gu Qingchen's spirit lifted, immediately replicating the method, feeding all suspicious dry goods and the previously collected hair to the white lantern. The lantern's light visibly became brighter and steadier, even the cold aura it radiated seemed to have thickened a little. Looking at the now empty pot with just a bit of oil residue left, Gu Qingchen thought for a moment and poured the previously taken out, seemingly normal soup back into the pot, making it look like he had drunk from it. Perfectly handled. Just as he finished dealing with everything. When she carefully covered the food box and pushed it to the door, a faint sound of footsteps came from outside. It wasn't a maid, nor the steward. It was Nangong Wan returning. She pushed open the door and walked in, her face seemingly paler than when she left, her eyes carrying an unmistakable hint of fatigue and worry. Her gaze quickly swept across the room, landing on Gu Qingchen, then scanning the table with the food box and empty bowl, finally resting on the noticeably brighter white lantern. She seemed to exhale slightly, but her brow remained slightly furrowed. "Husband, have you had lunch?" she asked softly, sitting down at the table. Gu Qingchen nodded, pointing to the food box. "My lady specially granted soup, the taste is very special." Nangong Wan's body stiffened slightly, looking at the stew pot with a complex expression, she whispered, "Mother has always been so concerned about the juniors." "The soup, you can have it, husband. This chapter should end in a few more pages." Her tone carried a subtle hint of guilt and fear. Gu Qingchen understood, Nangong Wan knew there was a problem with the soup. She had just gone to her mother's place, perhaps not only to be questioned but also to endure some pressure or test. "The taste was too strong, I only used a little," Gu Qingchen said calmly, "the rest was fed to the lantern, the effect was quite good." Nangong Wan suddenly looked up at him, her obsidian-like eyes filled with surprise, which quickly transformed into a strange color, like relief, yet also, wanting to laugh. She pressed her lips together, suppressing the curve that might rise at the corners of her mouth, her voice carrying a hint of brightness. "Husband, your method is indeed extraordinary, very good." It seemed that his way of handling the situation was serendipitously effective, not only avoiding a pitfall but also improving the lantern's condition, possibly even aligning with some rules. Elder's gifts, after all, were indeed sincerely savored. "Ha ha ha. Brother Chan is amazing. Feeding the lantern is still okay. The ghost lady's expression of wanting to laugh but holding it back is so cute. When it comes to clever moves, I still admire Brother Chen. The lady probably didn't expect it could be played this way. Lantern, burp not bad, bring more next time. This couple is starting to have a tacit understanding. It feels like Sister One isn't having a good time at her family home, her mother-in-law is too much of a burden." The atmosphere between the two eased quite a bit due to this small interlude. Nangong Wan looked at the noticeably brighter lantern, softly saying, "With the soul guiding lantern shining brighter, it is somewhat safer for you in the residence, but nourishing things are never a long-term solution." Gu Qingchen looked at her, "Is there a fundamental solution?" Nangong Wan paused for a moment, shook her head, her voice becoming softer. "I don't know, perhaps to leave completely." Her words trailed off, but the meaning was clear, leaving Nangong Mansion might be the true escape. But how to leave? The rules only state to complete the wedding, with no hints of leaving. Moreover, now that the wedding is done, they are still trapped here. Gu Qingchen did not press further and change the subject. "Did you just go to your mother's place? Is everything okay?" Nangong Wan's expression dimmed a little, managing a forced smile. "It's nothing major, just listening to some teachings." She clearly didn't want to talk much about it and shifted the topic. "If you feel bored in the afternoon, husband, you can take a stroll in the yard, but be sure not to leave the yard, nor go toward the east courtyard again." Again mentioning the east courtyard. Gu Qingchen recalled the handkerchief and casually asked, "I heard the scenery in the east courtyard is nice? Is there a lake?" Nangong Wan's face instantly turned pale, even whiter than any previous time, her body slightly trembling, deep fear reflected in her eyes as she suddenly grasped Gu Qingchen's arm tightly. "Husband! You absolutely cannot go. You must not go. That place is..." Her words were cut off. Bang! The door to the bridal chamber was suddenly flung open from outside. The figure of the steward, dressed in dark cloth, appeared at the doorway, his face still wearing that hollow expression, but his eyes were particularly profound. He stared intently into the room, watching the two people nearly leaning against each other, especially the hand of Nangong Wan grasping Gu Qingchen's arm. He dryly spoke, "Miss, the master requests your presence, immediately in the study." Nangong Wan seemed to be scalded, abruptly pulling back her hand, her face pale as she stood up, her voice slightly trembling. "Now?" "Yes, now." The butler's tone was firm and undebatable. The son-in-law should stay in the room to rest and must not wander about. Again, this summons that separated them. Gu Qingchen's heart alarmed, ringing loud. The master suddenly summoned Nangong Wan? Was it because she had spoken for him while serving tea just now? Or was it because they noticed the issue with the lunch soup? Or was it just because he mentioned the lake in the east courtyard? Nangong Wan worriedly glanced at Gu Qingchen and softly said, "Husband, wait for me to come back." After saying that, she took a deep breath and followed the butler out. The door closed again. Gu Qingchen was left alone in the red room, a growing sense of unease spreading in his heart. The master's study. That definitely was not a good place. Nangong Wan's visit there could spell disaster. He couldn't just sit and wait. Though the butler warned him not to wander, rules are dead, but people are alive. He needed to know what was happening. He walked to the window and carefully observed outside. The courtyard was silent, the corridor empty. He gently pushed open the window, swiftly leaping out and landing soundlessly. Avoiding the courtyard gate, he followed the shadow of the corridor, quietly trailing after where Nangong Wan and the butler had left. He wanted to see what the master of the Nangong family truly intended to do. The corridor was deep and the light dim. Gu Qingchen was like a ghost, utilizing the pillars and shadows to conceal himself, heightening his senses to the utmost. Up ahead, the butler's footsteps and Nangong Wan's very soft footsteps were faintly audible. They crossed several corridors, going deeper into a secluded area where the air grew increasingly cold. Finally, they stopped in front of a pitch-black wooden door. There was no plaque on the door, but it emanated a heavy, oppressive feeling. The butler pushed the door open and stepped aside to let Nangong Wan enter. Just as the door was about to close, Gu Qingchen vaguely heard a hoarse, cold voice from within, "Kneel." The door was completely shut, cutting off all sound. Gu Qingchen's heart sank. He hid in the shadows, his gaze fixed tightly on that pitch-black door. The master's study. What would happen inside? What could he do? Breaking in was definitely not an option, that would be seeking death. He could only wait. Time ticked by, each second seemed exceptionally long, with no sound emerging from the study, the silence horrifying. Just as Gu Qingchen considered whether to move closer. Ah! A woman's scream, extremely brief yet filled with pain, suddenly erupted from the study. It was Nangong Wan's voice. Though it was utterly cut off immediately, Gu Qingchen heard it clearly. His pupils abruptly contracted. Without any hesitation, he instantly activated his talent. Rule break. Target, rule number 1, restricted activity range. Breaking rule, activity range limited to the western guest room and the corridor outside, currently in the courtyard corridor. Rule temporarily ineffective? Consequences, unknown. Cooldown time, unknown. An invisible force seemed to spread from him as the center. The next second, Gu Qingchen shot out from the shadows like an arrow, rushing straight for that pitch-black door. He didn't care about the unknown consequences. He didn't care about the cooldown time. He only knew that Nangong Wan was in trouble. Bang! He kicked the study door hard. Old dang, the young master is here. He had already started to plan the next chapter, kids. Chapter 11 Study. Bang! The heavy, pitch-black wooden door was fiercely kicked open by Gu Qingchen, slamming against the internal wall with a massive echo. The scenes inside and outside the door instantly entered his sight. The study was extremely dim, lit only by a few oil lamps. The jumping flames cast various bizarre shadows on the walls and ceiling. The air was filled with an indescribable strange smell. Master Nangong still wore the dark red ancient outfit, sitting upright behind a massive black wooden desk. His face appeared even more gaunt and rigid in the flickering light, and those hollow eyes were fixed intently on the front of the desk. In front of the desk, Nangong Wan had fallen to the ground, her red wedding dress looking like spilled blood in the dim light. One hand pushed against the ground, while the other covered her face, her shoulders trembling slightly. Though her expression was hidden, the aura of pain and humiliation almost hit like a wave. The steward stood silently beside the master like a ghost, expressionless. The brief gasp just moments ago evidently originated from her. Gu Qingchen's sudden bursting in was like a huge stone thrown into a stagnant pool, instantly breaking the oppressive atmosphere in the study. 3 gazes instantly fixed upon him. Master Nangong's chilling anger. The steward's hollow scrutiny. And Nangong Wan's head snapped up suddenly. The clear red marks from 5 fingers on her pale face, and the shock, worry, and a hint of faint hope that surged in her obsidian eyes. Bold! Master Nangong's roar shook the oil lamp's flame. His withered hand slammed the desk, producing a dull thud. Who allowed you to intrude upon this treasured study? Breaking my household rules warrants punishment. You didn't expect to be caught, did you? A terrifying pressure surged towards Gu Qingchen like a tide, filled with deadly intent. The surrounding shadows seemed to writhe, as if something were about to leap out. The steward stepped forward, his gaze deep and fixed on Gu Qingchen, ready to strike at any moment. Yet Gu Qingchen seemed oblivious to the overwhelming pressure and killing intent. He stood at the doorway, his eyes first landing on the clear imprint of a hand on Nangong Wan's face, his expression turning icy cold in an instant. Only then did he slowly turn to face the enraged Master Nangong, his face showing not fear, but a hint of just the right kind of urgency and concern. He even let out a slight breath, feigned, and spoke in a tone filled with urgent explanation. Father, please calm your anger. Xingqian did not mean to offend. I seem to have heard Wanner gasp in the courtyard, worried that she might have met with an accident, and in my haste, I barged in. Are you all right? Wanner? His words were incredibly slick. He first admitted a minor offense, yet immediately shifted focus to the hearing the gasp and worrying about an accident and caring for father and wife, placing himself in the role of a concerned son-in-law. It perfectly matched the most valued rules and etiquette of the Nangong household. As if his kicking down the door was not a breach of decorum, but rather a sign of his deep concern for family. Master Nangong's surging killing intent momentarily faltered at these words. His hollow eyes stared hard at Gu Qingqian, as if trying to find any hint of hypocrisy on his face, but only found an expression full of sincere worry. To directly punish a son-in-law who cares for his wife and father-in-law? That seemed a bit inconsistent with the rules he had always tried to uphold. Nangong Wan also struggled to rise, her voice weak and tinged with tears. Father, my husband, he was only worried, please forgive him. Her plea further reinforced Gu Qingqian's persona of concern turning into chaos. The atmosphere in the study turned extremely strange. The killing intent hung ominously yet was temporarily covered by a layer of bizarre family ethics. Master Nangong's chest heaved slightly, his icy rage seemingly having nowhere to release, eventually transforming into a very suppressed cold snort. Ungracious thing. He muttered, unsure whether he was scolding Gu Qingqian, or Nangong Wan, or both at once. But he did not immediately yell for punishment or killing again. The shadows around temporarily stopped writhing. Gu Qingqian's heart settled a bit. Betting right on the first step. In this strange place where rules and face are valued above all, sometimes acting under the guise of filial piety and care becomes a sort of protective charm. He immediately took 2 steps forward, carefully reaching out to lift Nangong Wan, feeling her body was ice-cold and still slightly trembling. Are you okay? He asked in a low voice, his gaze sweeping over the red marks on her face. Nangong Wan slightly shook her head, using his arm to steady herself, lowering her head and daring not to look at old Master Nangong. Wow! Brother Chen is amazing. Breaking in to save his wife. This reaction is incredible. Did he just stun the old master? Using magic to defeat magic, using rules to fight against rules. Sister Wan's face has a clear palm print. That old man is inhuman. Damn, this makes me so angry. Brother Chen, take him down. But it seems like the old master is temporarily intimidated? Old Master Nangong's hollow eyes scanned back and forth between Gu Qingqian and Nangong Wan, cold as ever, but with a hint of calculation. He seemed to have temporarily suppressed the thought of immediate punishment, and in a hoarse voice, said darkly, since you are here, that's good. His bony fingers tapped on the desk. Gu Qingqian, since you have joined the Nangong family and become Wanner's husband, there are certain rules you should be aware of. Gu Qingqian lowered his gaze, please enlighten me, father. The Nangong residence does not raise useless people. Old Master Nangong's voice was cold and ruthless. Even less so can outsiders pry into the secrets of the house. He paused, his gaze fixed on Gu Qingqian like a venomous snake. Do you know that Wanner has made mistakes before? He was referring to the incident at the East Court Lake. Nangong Wan's body trembled violently. Gu Qingqian's expression remained unchanged. I've heard a little, but the past is the past. Now Wanner is Qingqian's wife, I will protect her, ensuring she no longer suffers from past troubles. These words were beautifully spoken, they acknowledged awareness and stated a position while emphasizing the responsibility of being a husband, silencing the old master. Old Master Nangong let out a strange noise from his throat, almost like a cold laugh. Sounding good, protect her? You? His hollow gaze swept over Gu Qingqian, filled with unabashed disdain. Recently, there is indeed a matter in the residence that needs handling. The old master's tone shifted, growing deeper. If you can manage it, then you may prove yourself qualified to be the son-in-law of the Nangong family. All past matters may be overlooked. If you fail, his voice suddenly turned icy, it will show you are incompetent and useless. Both you and Wanner's previous offenses will be dealt with together. The plot thickens. Was this the true purpose of summoning Nangong Wan to the study? Using her punishment to force Gu Qingqian into submission? Or perhaps to kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Chapter 12 Nangong Family Ancestral Hall. The overgrown grass reached his calves, feeling damp and cold to the touch. Gu Qingqian walked step by step toward the lonely, dilapidated ancestral hall standing in the center of the courtyard. The hall's door was dark red, but the paint had long since peeled away, covered with scratches and stains of various depths. Gu Qingqian reached out, gently pushing it. Creak. The door was not locked tight, creaking open and kicking up a cloud of dust. The scene behind the door was even dimmer, nearly impossible to see. Gu Qingqian stood at the entrance, not entering immediately. He lifted the white lantern in his hand, the pale light struggling to pierce the darkness, illuminating a small area inside the door. Before him was an extremely spacious hall.
The floor was covered in thick dust, cobwebs clung in the corners, and directly opposite the door were rows of dark memorial tablets stacked high on a tall altar, like countless silent eyes gazing down from the darkness. The inscriptions on the tablets were mostly blurred, with only some words like Nangong family, ancestral father, and ancestral mother visible. The offering table in front of the altar was empty, covered in dust. Under the offering table lay a few things that looked like mats. The entire ancestral hall was eerily silent. The sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Yet Gu Qingqian's keen senses picked up a kind of background noise. It was an extremely subtle buzzing sound, or rather a whisper, as if countless people were murmuring far away. Unable to hear the content clearly, it drilled into the ears without any gaps, making one feel restless and causing chills on the scalp. Is this what the old master called the dirty thing stirring? Gu Qingqian stepped over the high threshold and walked inside. His feet stepped on the thick dust, making a faint puffing sound. Just as he fully entered the ancestral hall. Bang! The two broken doors behind him slammed shut by themselves. With a loud sound, it completely isolated the gray light from outside. The ancestral hall instantly fell into almost complete darkness, with only the pale light from the lantern in his hand forming a weak and cold circle, barely illuminating a few steps around him. The darkness pressed in like thick ink from all directions. The whispering buzzing sound seemed to become clearer. Gu Qingqian's heartbeat quickened slightly, but there was still little expression on his face. He had long anticipated that things wouldn't go smoothly. He lifted the lantern and slowly walked towards the row of spirit tablets on the altar. According to the old master's orders, he needed to place the dark talisman beneath the spirit tablets. He arrived at the offering table, and the dust made him frown slightly. He extended his other hand to brush away the dust beneath the offering table, trying to see if there was a suitable place to put the talisman. Just as his fingers were about to touch beneath the offering table. Snap! A slight crisp sound, as if something had fallen from above and landed in the dust at his feet. Gu Qingqian paused, and the light of the lantern immediately moved down. It illuminated the object on the ground. It was a piece of spirit tablet. Made of black wood, the edges somewhat damaged, and the characters carved on it seemed to have been scratched by something, becoming blurry, barely recognizable as the word Nangong. Did this spirit tablet fall from above? Gu Qingqian raised his head and looked at the tall altar. The spirit tablets were densely arranged, seemingly without any vacancies. Was it an accident? Or... Before he could think clearly. Snap! 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 A series of crisp sounds. Piece after piece of spirit tablets fell like rain, unexpectedly dropping from the high altar and landing in the dust around Gu Qingqian, making dull thudding sounds. The characters on these falling spirit tablets were all unclear, either scratched or stained with dark smudges. Their falling positions were quite clever, appearing chaotic, yet subtly forming a circle, surrounding Gu Qingqian in the middle. That pervasive whispering buzzing sound suddenly grew louder. It became sharper, as if carrying endless resentment and curses, frantically drilling into his mind. The surrounding darkness began to writhe violently, as if countless twisted shadows were rolling within, trying to pounce into the range of the lantern's light. The pale lantern's light began to flicker, shaking violently. As if it would extinguish at any moment. Crisis. The things in this ancestral hall did not want him to place the talisman peacefully. They might even want to swallow him directly. Gu Qingqian's gaze sharpened, and without hesitation, he activated his talent again. Rule breakdown. Objective, the old master's command. Place it beneath the spirit tablets in the ancestral hall. Rule violation, place the talisman. Rule temporarily invalidated. Consequence, unknown. Cooldown time, unknown. The moment the talent was successfully activated, the malice and resentment directed at him abruptly stagnated, as if it had lost a clear target. The wildly writhing darkness around him paused for a moment. The resentful whispers crazily drilling into his mind also weakened significantly, returning to the previous buzzing noise like background noise. The rain of falling spirit tablets also ceased. The pale lantern's light gradually stabilized, although it was still suppressed to a very small range. Gu Qingqian felt slightly relieved. Indeed, the old master's command itself was also a rule that needed to be strictly followed. Destroying it, instead, could temporarily disrupt the attack logic of these things in the ancestral hall. But this is not a long-term solution. The talent has a cooldown time, and the consequences are unknown. He must find a better way to survive this night. He looked down at the pitch-black charm in his hand. What exactly is this thing? A town object? Or a lure? He tried to bring the charm closer to the light of the white lantern. Hiss. The twisted spell drawn with cinnabar on the charm's surface emitted a faint wisp of black smoke under the pale light, releasing a burnt odor. The charm itself also trembled slightly, as if it strongly resisted the light of the lantern. It works. The light of this white lantern seems to restrain this strange charm?
Or perhaps, the charm and the things in the ancestral hall share the same origin, and the light of the white lantern has a suppressive effect on both? A bold idea began to form in Gu Qingshan's mind. He didn't try to place the charm again. Instead, he carefully observed the broken tablets that had fallen at his feet, under the light of the lantern. The names on these tablets had been deliberately destroyed. Why? Why would the ancestor tablets of the Nangong family be filled with such strong resentment? Even rejecting later generations? The master asked him to suppress it, but what exactly is he suppressing? He thought of Nangong Wan, thought of the handkerchief embroidered with "not returning" and the maid's words "unable to let go." The lake in the eastern courtyard. A vague guess gradually took shape. Perhaps Nangong Wan's "unable to let go" was not merely personal despair? Perhaps it is related to this ancestral hall, and these ancestors filled with resentment? Did the master really ask him here to suppress unclean things? Or was it for something else? Perhaps, to kill someone using a knife? Or to test something? Chapter 13, The Little Girl. Time slowly passed in the dead silence and eerie buzzing. Gu Qingshan didn't move. He stood in the center of the circle formed by the fallen tablets, holding the white lantern in one hand and the trembling pitch-black charm in the other, remaining highly alert. In the darkness, those wriggling shadows seemed to have not given up. They still lingered around the edge of the light circle, watching with greedy eyes. The low whispering buzzing sound continued, trying to find an opportunity to strike again. No one knew how much time had passed. Gulu. A faint sound suddenly came from behind the shrine. It was as if something round had fallen to the ground and rolled a few times. Gu Qingshan immediately directed the lantern's light toward that direction. Where the light reached, there was nothing. But the next second. Gulu. The sound came again. This time from another direction. As if it was right beside his ear. Then. Tap. 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 A sound like a wooden stick hitting the ground came from the deepest darkness of the ancestral hall. The sound grew closer and clearer. It was as if something was walking step by step, coming out of the deepest darkness. Gu Qingshan tightened his grip on the charm, his muscles tensed. The light of the white lantern seemed to sense the threat and struggled to expand its light circle, but it was still being firmly suppressed by the thick darkness. Tap. 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 The sound drew nearer. Finally, at the very edge of the light that the lantern could reach, a vague figure appeared. It was an extremely tiny figure, almost like a child, or perhaps like a small old lady. Its movement was extremely strange, stiff and slow, each step producing the tap-tap sound of a wooden stick hitting the ground. It shuffled closer into the range of the lantern's light. The light illuminated it. It was not a child or an old lady at all. It was a human-shaped wooden puppet, roughly carved out of wood. Only half a person tall, with its joints bound together by rough hemp ropes, its face had no features, just a blank space. And the reason it could move was because two small wooden wheels were attached to the bottom of its feet. The dita sound was the noise of the wooden wheel rolling over the uneven ground. In its hand, it was dragging something. That was a dirty cloth doll, with eyes and a mouth sewn on its face in crooked red thread. The faceless puppet dragged the screaming doll, moving stiffly towards Gu Qingshan. Its blank face was facing Gu Qingshan. A much more tangible malice than those whispers radiated from this strange puppet. Gu Qingshan felt the white lantern in his hand begin to flicker violently again. The pitch-black talisman shook wildly, as if it wanted to fly out of his grip. This puppet is one of the real things from the ancestral hall? What does it want to do? The puppet seemed to quicken its pace, the dita sound turning urgent. The distance between it and Gu Qingshan slowly shrank. 10 steps. 9 steps. 8 steps. The surrounding whispers seemed to cheer it on, becoming higher and sharper. Darkness surged wildly. Gu Qingshan's gaze was cold, his mind racing. A hard confrontation? This puppet felt extremely dangerous, and both the white lantern and the talisman seemed to respond to it, but the effect was unclear. Continue to break the rules? The cooldown time was unknown, and the consequences unknown. Just as the puppet closed in within 5 steps, and he could even smell the mixed scent of rotting wood and blood coming from it. Gu Qingshan made an unexpected move. He did not retreat, nor did he attack. Instead, he suddenly slammed the pitch-black talisman that was violently vibrating in his hand towards the faceless puppet. You want it, right? Here you go. The talisman transformed into a shadow, accurately striking the puppet's blank face. Just as the talisman was about to hit the puppet, that faceless puppet's blank face suddenly split open with a dark crack, like a mouth opening wide. Whoosh! The talisman was directly swallowed into that crack. The puppet's movements suddenly froze. It trembled violently, making creaking sounds. The screaming doll it was dragging also twisted wildly.
After swallowing the talisman, the malice radiating from the puppet did not increase, but became chaotic and violent instead. As if the talisman was both a supplement and a poison to it. It began to spin in place, the wooden wool making a piercing noise, its blank face distorted, seemingly enduring great pain. The surrounding shadows and whispers grew more frantic but dared not approach the chaotic puppet. Gu Qingchen looked on coldly. He guessed correctly. This talisman and those things in the Ancestral Hall indeed came from the same source, but they seemed to be not completely compatible. Forcing the devour would only cause internal power conflicts. And that gave him a chance to breathe. He ignored the creaking puppet and quickly moved his feet, avoiding the scattered memorial tablets on the ground, swiftly reaching the wall of the Ancestral Hall. He leaned against the wall, reducing the directions he needed to defend, and then raised the white lantern, striving to maintain the stability of its light. The puppet spun chaotically in place for nearly a quarter of an hour before gradually calming down. It seemed to have digested the talisman. Its blank face turned towards Gu Qingchen again, and that icy malice reconvened, but seemingly more solidified. It began to move again, approaching Gu Qingchen. But this time, its speed was slower, and it seemed more cautious. Gu Qingchen cursed inwardly. This thing is more troublesome than he imagined. As he pondered the next move. Creak, creak, creak. A very faint, girl-like giggle suddenly came from above the beams of the Ancestral Hall. Gu Qingchen's scalp tingled, and he suddenly looked up. He saw on the dark beams an unknown little figure dressed in a red dress sitting there. Her feet were hanging in the air, gently swaying, producing that giggle-light laugh. But Gu Qingchen could not see her face. Her face seemed to be shrouded in a layer of blurry shadow. Only a pair of eyes were exceptionally clear. That was a pair of completely black eyes, without any whites. They blinked unblinkingly, carrying an innocent yet innocent smile, looking down at Gu Qingchen below. On the beam, the little girl in red swung her feet, the giggling sound echoing in the dead silence of the shrine, innocent yet strange. Those eyes without whites were like two bottomless black holes, firmly locking onto Gu Qingchen below. On the ground, the faceless wooden puppet that had swallowed the charm seemed to sense a new presence, its blank face slowly turning upwards, as if also looking at the unexpected guest on the beam. A wave of malice descended from above, intertwining and colliding with the malice emitted by the puppet on the ground. The light of the white lantern began to flicker again under the pressure of these two forces, the circle of light compressed to barely illuminate a small area beneath Gu Qingchen's feet. Gu Qingchen's back pressed against the cold wall, his heart uncontrollably quickening. One problem not solved, and another arrives? And this little girl felt even more dangerous than that puppet to him. Chapter 14, Transmission. Giggle, giggle, giggle. The little girl's laughter became clearer, as if she found the scene before her very amusing. She increased her swaying a little, a pair of shoes with strange patterns peeking out from under her skirt. Suddenly, her laughter stopped. She tilted her head, the blurry shadow on her face seeming to ripple slightly. Then, she spoke in an extremely childish voice. "Big brother, you have a nice smell." Gu Qingchen's heart shuddered. A nice smell? Could it be that his kingly aura leaked out? Or is she referring to the white lantern in his hand? Or, is she talking about the charm that was swallowed by the puppet just now? Before he could think clearly, the little girl spoke again, her pitch-black eyes turning to the faceless puppet on the ground. "Ugly, would you ate something you shouldn't have spit it out?" Her voice remained childish, yet carried a tone of command. The faceless puppet trembled suddenly, seemingly extremely wary of the little girl, but it not only failed to spit out the charm, but instead emitted a sharp creaking sound, as if protesting. The rag doll it was dragging also suddenly stood up, glowering at the beam with its crooked red thread eyes. "Not obedient." The little girl's voice turned cold. She gently raised one hand, a pale hand with no trace of blood, yet the nails were strangely pitch black. She faced the faceless puppet and flicked her finger. There was no sound, no light effect. But the faceless puppet on the ground seemed to be struck hard by an invisible giant hammer. Crash! Its wooden body violently flew backward, crashing heavily into the distant shrine wall, producing a huge sound. Several strands of the hemp rope tied around it snapping, and the tattered rag doll it was holding flew away. The puppet fell to the ground, struggling, emitting painful creaking sounds, its blank face twisting. A thick black mist emerged from its body, within which the outline of the black charm could be seen struggling and flickering. Gu Qingchen watched, horrified in his heart. Who is this little girl? She injured the seemingly fierce puppet with a snap of her fingers? The little girl on the beam seemed to have accomplished a small feat. She withdrew her hand and once again cast her pitch-black eyes on Gu Qingchen, her mouth seemingly curving into a naive and innocent arc. "Big brother, now no one is disturbing us." Her voice returned to that childish tone. "Can you let me play with your lantern for a bit?" Play with the lantern? Gu Qingchen tightened his grip on the handle of the white lantern. This lantern was his lifeline. How could she play with her? No. Gu Qingchen rejected directly, alarm bells ringing in his heart.
The little girl tilted her head further, seemingly confused. Why not? Shaoling just wants to play for a little bit, just a little bit. She actually began to act spoiled, but the cold malice in her eyes showed no sign of fading. Your lantern, so bright, so warm. Shaoling likes it. As she spoke, a longing for light shone in her pitch-black eyes, but this desire was chilling. Gu Qingqian's mind raced. He couldn't handle it head-on. This little girl's strength was unfathomable, but handing over the lantern was a death sentence. He had to find a way to maneuver. This lantern cannot be given to you, Gu Qingqian tried to keep his voice as neutral as possible. If I give it to you, I will die. Die? The little girl seemed taken aback for a moment, then burst into laughter. Dying isn't fun, you can't move when you're dead just like that ugly wooden thing down there, it's not fun at all. She seemed to have a childlike understanding of death. Well, then come and play with Shaoling. She proposed a new request, her voice filled with excitement. Come up. Big brother, come up. It's fun up here. Go up? On the beam? Gu Qingqian glanced at the high beam, realizing that going up would be a true slaughter. I can't go up. Gu Qingqian stated honestly. You're so useless. The little girl seemed a bit disappointed, muttering to herself. But her pitch-black eyes suddenly lit up again, then. Shaoling will come down to play with you. Before her voice fell, the figure of the little girl in red suddenly disappeared from the beam without warning. In the next second, Gu Qingqian felt an icy chill rapidly approaching. He didn't have time to react. A small red figure abruptly appeared right in front of him, nearly face to face. He could even smell a faint, strange scent emanating from her. The hazy shadow still shrouded her face, but those pitch-black eyes, without any reflection, were looking at him, filled with curiosity. Big brother, don't you see Shaoling's face? She mumbled closely, her icy breath brushing against Gu Qingqian's face. Gu Qingqian's body instantly went rigid with fear. The intense feeling of danger made him instinctively want to attack or flee. But he forcibly suppressed this impulse, knowing any overreacting response could lead to instant annihilation. He forced himself to stand still, not retreating even a half-step, just lowering his gaze slightly to look at the little face before him, trying to keep his tone as steady as possible. I can't see clearly. Oh. The little girl seemed disappointed. She stretched out her pale little hand, seemingly wanting to touch Gu Qingqian's face or the lantern he held. Gu Qingqian's heart leapt into his throat, the strange power from the half-cup of marriage wine within him felt restless. Just as her dark nails were about to touch the lantern. Buzz. Something in Gu Qingqian's arms suddenly vibrated slightly. And it emitted a faint presence. It was the plain handkerchief embroidered with, if not, return. He hadn't put it back on the dresser after inspecting it, instead, he unconsciously tucked it into his bosom. At this moment, the handkerchief actually responded on its own. The little girl in red abruptly stopped her movements. Her pale little hand, which was about to touch the lantern, hung in midair. She tilted her head as if puzzled by the faint cool aura and familiar. What is this? She uttered in confusion, her black pupils spinning, trying to look at Gu Qingqian's chest. In that brief pause. Husband. A very weak voice filled with concern echoed directly in Gu Qingqian's mind, as if crossing space. It was Nangong Wan's voice. This voice seemed to have expended immense strength, sounding frail yet incredibly urgent. Ancestral Hall, vengeful child afraid of light, even more afraid of her name, trying to call her true name, perhaps can temporarily retreat. The voice suddenly cut off, as if some force had forcibly severed it. But the message had been delivered. Chapter 15. The night was only half gone. Vengeful child, afraid of light, more afraid of her name, call her true name. Gu Qingqian instantly grasped this lifeline. True name? What is she called? Nangong Wan didn't say. Was it too late to say? Or could she not say it directly? In a flash, Gu Qingqian remembered the little girl's self-introduction just now. Little Ling. Is this the name? Seeing that the girl called Vengeful Child seemed to have come back to her senses from the interference of the handkerchief, her dark nails reached toward the lantern again. Gu Qingqian no longer hesitated, he suddenly spoke out, his voice filled with certainty. Little Ling. The Vengeful Child's movements froze again, the blurry shadow covering her face trembled violently, as if it revealed an expression of extreme shock. How do you know? Her voice was no longer that tender, cold tone, but carried a hint of disbelief and tremor. Effective. Gu Qingqian felt a wave of relief, seizing the moment, his tone became more steady, even carrying a sense of authority. Of course I know, Little Ling, you shouldn't be playing here, go back. He actually didn't know where she should go back to, just bluffing based on Nangong Wan's hint. Go back? The Vengeful Child Little Ling seemed stunned by his words, she withdrew her hand, her small body taking half a step back, her voice becoming somewhat confused and wronged. Where to go back? Where is? The malice and coldness on her seemed to diminish a bit, replaced by an indelible sadness and confusion. Outside is not fun, they all fear me, hate me, she murmured softly, like an abandoned child. Only here dark quiet. Gu Qingchen listened silently, quickly analyzing in his heart. This vengeful child seemed to have some tragic past, trapped in this ancestral hall. But you shouldn't disturb me. Gu Qingchen continued to maintain his tone. I have my own business. Little Ling looked up, her dark eyes gazing at him, then glanced at the white lantern in his hand. Her eyes still held desire but added a bit of hesitation and caution. Your lantern is really warm, she said softly. I just want to get a little closer. Her attitude had clearly changed from before's coercion to now's negotiation or even pleading. Gu Qingchen's heart stirred. Did she just desire brightness? Not purely malicious? He glanced at the white lantern in his hand. Although the light was suppressed, it indeed emitted a unique stabilizing aura. Perhaps another method could be tried? He cautiously extended the white lantern slightly forward, allowing the light to shine more upon little Ling, but still kept it within his control. You can feel its light, but you cannot touch it. Gu Qingchen set the boundary. The pale light illuminated the vengeful child little Ling's red dress and pale skin, as if coating her with a layer of cold silver edge. Little Ling's body trembled slightly, not out of fear, but a kind of like welcoming rain after a long drought, comfort and enjoyment. The blurry shadow on her face seemed to fade a little. So comfortable she let out a satisfied sigh, closing her dark eyes, quietly bathing in the lantern's light, as if forgetting everything around her. The faceless puppet on the ground, which had been struggling earlier, seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. It creaked as it tried to rise, but seeing the vengeful child little Ling bathing quietly in the light, it hesitated for a moment, eventually slowly dragging its broken body back into the deepest darkness of the ancestral hall, disappearing along with that tattered doll. The writhing shadows and resentful whispers around also seemed to lose their backbone, gradually calming down. Transformed back into that initial buzzing noise like background static. The tense atmosphere in the ancestral hall unexpectedly eased in this surprising way. Gu Qingchen leaned against the wall, steadily holding the lantern in his hand, watching the quiet, glowing vengeful child in front of him, feeling secretly relieved in his heart. That was close. If it weren't for Nangong Wan's timely message, and if he hadn't coincidentally brought that handkerchief causing Shaoling's momentary hesitation, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Wanner, how is she? What price did forcibly sending a message cost her? Will the master find out? Worry surged in his heart. But now is not the time to think too much. He must stabilize the situation in front of him. The vengeful child, Shaoling, seemed to be enjoying the light of the lantern. She closed her eyes, and a hint of serenity appeared on her pale face. Time slowly flowed by. After an unknown amount of time, Shaoling slowly opened her eyes. The coldness and malice in her pitch-black eyes seemed to have dissipated significantly, though still inhuman, now laced with a hint of confusion. Big brother, thank you. She said softly, her voice carrying much less chill. You? Gu Qingchen tentatively began. Have you been here the whole time? Shaoling nodded, then shook her head, a look of bewilderment on her face. Shaoling doesn't remember. It seems like I slept for a very long time, woke up and was here, dark, cold. She seemed to be lacking memories. Who put you here? Gu Qingchen continued to probe. Shaoling thought hard, a flicker of pain and fear crossing her pitch-black eyes. Hurts, it hurts so much, red, water, so much, then. I was here. The fragmented words painted a terrifying picture. Gu Qingchen's heart sank. The birth of this vengeful child was probably filled with blood and suffering. Is she, like Nangong Wan, a victim under the eerie circumstances of the Nangong mansion? At that moment, Shaoling suddenly seemed to sense something, and turned her head sharply toward the door of the ancestral hall, a hint of disgust showing on her face. The disgusting smell, it's here again, they always do this, staring, watching. What she seemed to refer to was the thing outside the ancestral hall, or perhaps, the butler. Shaoling's figure began to blur, seeming unable to maintain this stable state for long. Big brother. Shaoling has to go. Next time, can I come find you to play with the lantern? She looked up, her black eyes looking at Gu Qingchen with a hint of expectation. Gu Qingchen thought for a moment and nodded. Yes, but you can't scare me again, and you can't hurt me. MHM. Shaoling nodded vigorously, her figure quickly fading, as if merging into the darkness, leaving only the final faint whisper. It's a promise. As she disappeared, the ancestral hall fell completely silent again, only the low murmur of background noise and the steady light of the white lantern remaining. Gu Qingchen let out a long sigh, feeling his back was already soaked in cold sweat. Chapter 16, The Guard. The ancestral hall returned to silence. After the vengeful child Shaoling disappeared, that cold malice also faded, leaving only the low hum-like background noise, and the invisible gaze still lurking in the darkness. The light of the white lantern steadily illuminated the area around Gu Qingchen for a few steps. Gu Qingchen leaned against the cold wall, slowly sliding down to the ground. The tightly coiled nerves were slightly relaxed, followed by a wave of intense fatigue. His standoff with the vengeful child seemed brief, yet it was perilous and exhausting to his mental state. He looked down at the white lantern in his hand. The light seemed to have dimmed slightly compared to before, and evidently, the continued struggle against the shadowy environment of the ancestral hall was consuming its power. It needs more food. But in this abandoned ancestral hall, what else is there besides dust and memorial tablets? His gaze swept over the scattered memorial tablets on the ground. Do these count? He carefully nudged a nearby memorial tablet with his toe. The black wooden tablet gleamed faintly under the lantern light. The markings on the surface were blurred, stained with dark smudges. He hesitated for a moment, but finally reached out his hand and quickly touched the edge of the tablet with his fingertip. It was icy cold. A faint feeling of resentment tried to surge into his mind along his fingertip, but was quickly blocked by the stable aura given off by the white lantern. It was useful. These broken tablets indeed contained a kind of energy. Although filled with negative emotions, perhaps they could be absorbed by the lantern? Gu Qingchen no longer hesitated. He picked up the tablet and tried to bring it close to the flame of the lantern. Sizzle. Unlike when burning hair and nail clippings, the tablet did not immediately catch fire upon touching the flame. Instead, the dark stains on its surface began to fade gradually, as if being purified by the light. At the same time, an extremely thin wisp of black smoke rose, merging into the flames. The light of the white lantern seemed to solidify a bit. Effective, but the efficiency was very low, and the process was difficult. The lantern had to work harder to purify and absorb this resentful energy than it did the physical impurities. Gu Qingchen frowned slightly. Any benefit was better than none. He began to gather the scattered tablets around him, patiently feeding them to the white lantern. This process was tedious and exhausting. He had to remain constantly vigilant of the surrounding sounds to prevent anything else from emerging. Time passed slowly in silence. After processing an unknown number of tablets, the light of the lantern finally returned to the level it had been before entering the shrine, and even seemed a bit more refined. The cold aura it emitted seemed to form a more stable barrier, pushing away those low whispers and buzzing a bit further. Gu Qingchen breathed a sigh of relief. With this layer of protection, he felt more confident in facing any possible changes ahead. He leaned against the wall to rest for a moment. His mind replayed everything that had happened after entering the shrine, especially the words from the resentful child Shaoling and Nangong Wan. "Wanner, how is she?" To forcibly break through the Lord's blockade to send him a message must have come at a great cost. Is she safe now? Would the Lord take out his anger on her because of this? Worry coiled around his heart like vines. And then there was Shaoling. Resentful child. Afraid of light. Even more afraid of its name. Nangong Wan's key hint. But what exactly was this resentful child? She also seemed to be a victim of the Nangong family, imprisoned in the shrine, longing for light but burdened with great resentment. What she mentioned about red water and "it hurt so much" sent chills down one's spine. How much bloodshed and evil lay hidden beneath the glamorous surface of the Nangong mansion? What was the real purpose of the Lord sending him to the shrine to guard? Was it really just a way to use him as a pawn? Or was it to exploit the conflict between him and Shaoling for some aim? For example, to further provoke Shaoling's resentment? Or to test the limits of him and the white lantern? His thoughts were chaotic. At this moment, the plain handkerchief in his arms trembled slightly again, emitting an extremely faint cool aura. Gu Qingchen's heart stirred. He took it out. The handkerchief appeared even plainer under the lantern's light. The words "not better to return" seemed to contain endless sorrow. This handkerchief had elicited responses from Shaoling twice. Did they have some connection? Could it be that Shaoling was related to Nangong Wan? A bold guess flashed through his mind. Nangong Wan drowned herself in the lake, and Shaoling also mentioned red water and pain. Were their experiences similar? Was Shaoling also some woman from the Nangong family who tried to resist or encountered misfortune? Because her resentment did not dissipate, she transformed into a resentful child? Gu Qingchen looked at the handkerchief in his hand, feeling as if he had touched a corner of the eerie iceberg beneath the Nangong mansion. The long night seemed to finally reveal a glimmer of light. Morning should not be far off. Outside the shrine, it remained quiet and silent. The steward had not appeared, and the Lord showed no new movements. As if he had been forgotten here. But Gu Qingchen dared not relax at all. The final moments are often the most dangerous. He tightened his grip on the lantern, adjusting his breath, elevating his state to its best, ready to face the possible final test that might come. Time passed second by second. The murmurs and buzzing sounds around seemed to have changed, no longer just pure malice and curses, but mixed with an anxious emotion, as if those things in the darkness had sensed something. The lantern's light shone steadily. Suddenly, the decrepit door of the shrine creaked slightly. As if someone was extremely lightly touching it from the outside. Gu Qingchen instantly became alert, his gaze sharply directed toward the door. The creak sounded again. This time it was clearer. Following that, a slow scraping sound arose. The two doors, which should have been locked from the inside, were actually being slowly pushed open from the outside. A narrow gap appeared, and outside was still deep darkness. Who is it? The steward? Here to inspect the results? Or something else? Gu Qingchen slowly stood up, every muscle in his body tensed, the white lantern's light focused on the entrance. The gap grew wider. A blurry figure appeared behind the door gap. It seemed not as tall as the steward. That figure slowly pushed the door open enough for a person to pass through, and then, a silhouette in a light-colored dress slipped in. Once the person entered the shrine, she gently closed the door behind her, then quickly turned to face the inside. The lantern's light illuminated her face. Pale, haggard, with lingering worry in her eyes, a fine bead of sweat glistening on her forehead. It was Nangong Wan. Gu Qingchen was stunned, the tense strings of his heart slightly relaxed, but then immediately tightened again. How could she be here? How did she get in? Does the master know? Could this be a new trap? Husband. Nangong Wan's gaze quickly locked onto him, and seeing him unharmed, she visibly breathed a sigh of relief, but her voice was still extremely low, filled with urgency. Chapter 17, A Dead End. Continuing from the previous text. No way out. The sound of cold armor scraping accompanied by orderly footsteps quickly approached the shrine courtyard. The pressure from Master Nangong was like dark clouds overhead, enveloping everything, making the whispers inside the shrine excited. A dead end. No front or back escape. Nangong Wan's face changed dramatically, her eyes filled with despair, as she grasped Gu Qingchen's hand, trembling slightly. There's no time. She murmured, her tone full of sadness. Gu Qingchen's heart also raced violently, but he forced himself to calm down. The more it was such a moment, the less he could panic. His brain was operating at an unprecedented speed, his gaze quickly scanning the interior of the shrine. Crash through? Outside were Master Nangong's personal guards, it would absolutely be a dead end. Hide? This shrine was empty and dilapidated, there was simply nowhere to hide. Beg for mercy? This was the worst option, although it wouldn't be of much use. The master's aim was to see him dead. What else? What else could be used? His gaze suddenly fixed on the deep part of the shrine, the direction where the faceless puppet and the vengeful child, Shaoling, had disappeared into darkness. Nangong Ling. That sister filled with resentment, imprisoned here. The master seemed quite wary of her, only daring to control her from a distance with talismans. Perhaps this was the only variable. Waner. Gu Qingchen suddenly tightened his grip on Nangong Wan's hand, speaking rapidly. Nangong Ling, can we try to communicate with her again? Or provoke her? Nangong Wan paused for a moment, instantly understanding Gu Qingchen's intention. Do you mean? Create chaos, muddy the waters, we will have our chance. Gu Qingchen's eyes were sharp. The master wants to use her, so we'll let this utilization spiral completely out of control. A glimmer of struggle flashed in Nangong Wan's eyes, but seeing Gu Qingchen's determined gaze, and hearing the footsteps drawing closer outside, she gritted her teeth. I'll try. But her emotions are extremely unstable. It is very likely. There is no time to hesitate. Gu Qingchen interrupted her. At that moment. Bang! The already dilapidated door of the Ancestral Hall was violently smashed open from the outside, splintering into pieces and burning away completely. Outside, under the dim light, a dark mass of figures stood. They were several people wearing decayed black armor, wielding rusted weapons. They were tall, their faces shrouded in the shadows of their helmets, only 2 points of scarlet light visible, exuding a chilling aura of death. These are the personal guards of the Nangong family? They were clearly a squad of corpse soldiers. And in front of these corpse soldiers stood the thin-faced old master Nangong. In his hollow eyes, there burned anger and a barely perceptible greed. He was staring intensely at Gu Qingchen and the white lantern in his hand. The butler crouched like a ghost behind the old master. Damn it! Old Master Nangong's roar was like thunder, shaking the entire Ancestral Hall. You have broken my rules, left your post, and dared to collude with the traitorous girl. You deserve to die 1,000 deaths. He did not give any chance for a defense, or rather, he did not need a defense at all. Take them down, kill without mercy, bring me that lantern. The old master's bony hand waved. The 2 corpse soldiers at the front immediately marched forward with heavy steps, their armor clanging, approaching Gu Qingchen and Nangong Wan. The rusted long knives in their hands raised, exuding strong death energy. Nangong Wan was so scared that her face paled, nearly collapsing to the ground. Gu Qingchen quickly pulled her behind him while lifting the white lantern, channeling all his strength. Buzz. The light of the white lantern suddenly intensified for a brief moment, its pale light stabbing toward the 2 corpse soldiers like a sharp sword. The corpse soldiers hesitated slightly, their scarlet eyes flickering as if they were resistant to this light, but they did not stop, they continued to advance stubbornly. The light could only delay them, not completely stop them. The gap was too great. Waner! Gu Qingchen shouted anxiously. Nangong Wan also knew it was a life and death moment. She suddenly bit her tongue, forming a strange handprint with both hands, closing her eyes and calling out to the darkness deep within the ancestral hall with an extremely sorrowful tone. Linger! Sister! Look at them trying to take your light again, just like back then. They will never let us go, they will always trap us in darkness. Her voice carried a peculiar power, penetrating the footsteps of the corpse soldiers, piercing through the old master's roar, directly flooding into the endless darkness. Boom! The entire ancestral hall violently shook, as if some colossal creature had been completely awakened from its slumber. A thick, rich black mist erupted like a volcanic explosion from beneath the ancestral hall, from the cracks in the walls, flooding out from every corner. The murmuring sounds instantly turned into the shrieks of billions of vengeful souls, piercing and painful to the ears. Unbridled. Old Master Nangong's expression finally changed, no longer cold but filled with a hint of anger and fear. Stop her! The corpse soldiers behind him immediately rushed forward. But it was already too late. Creak, 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 creak. The familiar and creepy laughter of a child echoed again, but this time, the laughter was filled with endless resentment and a hatred to destroy everything. Hateful, hateful, hateful. They are all bad people, stealing little Ling's light, bullying sister. Kill you all, kill them all. Accompanied by this frenzied scream, the thick black mist instantly condensed into countless twisted black giant hands, covering the sky and reaching out toward the corpse soldiers and old Master Nangong at the door. The first two corpse soldiers were immediately grabbed by 7 or 8 black giant hands. Crack! Crack! The sound of bones breaking echoed. The seemingly sturdy black armor was as fragile as paper under these giant hands formed by resentment, crushing and tearing the soldiers inside into countless pieces. Stinking dark brown liquid splattered everywhere. Terrifying attack power. The remaining corpse soldiers immediately formed a line, wielding their rusty weapons to block the black giant hands, but they were clearly very scared of this resentment, being beaten back step by step, their formation completely in chaos. Master Nangong was both shocked and angry, a dark red halo rising from his body, barely resisting the several black giant hands reaching for him, but that halo was also shaking violently, clearly straining to hold up. Nangong Ling, you actually dare to? The master trembled with rage, trying to reprimand. But responding to him were more black giant hands and the resentful child's piercing scream filled with hatred. Old swindler, bad guy. I will kill you. Eat you. Chaos, complete chaos. The entrance of the ancestral hall instantly transformed into a hellish scene of resentment, corpse soldiers, and the master's power colliding. The terrifying shockwave rampaged, swirling the dust and fragments of the memorial tablets into the sky. Gu Qingchen and Nangong Wan were pushed back repeatedly by this sudden terrifying change, tightly leaning against each other. The white lantern's light swayed unsteadily in the violent flow of energy, struggling to protect a small area around them. Chapter 18, East Courtyard Lake Heart. Gu Qingchen half held the almost unconscious Nangong Wan, struggling to move forward. The light of the white lantern carved out the only path in absolute darkness, the light flickering, illuminating Nangong Wan's face, which was pale to the point of near transparency. Her breath was weak, her body light as a feather, and growing colder, as if some support within her was rapidly disappearing. The consumption of her soul power was causing her unimaginable damage. Waner, hold on. Gu Qingchen's voice was hoarse, he tightened his arms, trying to convey a bit of warmth, even though he knew this was completely useless. All he could do now was to quickly find an exit, a place that might provide her with a moment to breathe. The passage seemed endless, continuously sloping downward. The air grew more humid. It was the smell of water. Gu Qingchen's heart sank slightly. He remembered the rules, remembered the maids crying, remembered Nangong Wan's past, remembered the handkerchief. The lake in the East Courtyard? Could this passage lead to the strictly forbidden East Courtyard Lake? With an unknown road ahead and pursuers behind, he had no choice but to move on. Finally, ahead, the weak light gradually grew larger, no longer an unreachable hope. It carried a breath of deathly silence. The passage ended. The exit was obscured by dense vines and water plants. Gu Qingchen carefully pushed aside these obstacles, and the sight before him left him breathless. He had indeed arrived at the lakeside. But this lake was completely different from any lake he had imagined. It had no sparkling waves, no rippling water. The lake water was an almost solid ink black, its surface smooth as a mirror, not a single ripple, resembling a polished piece of obsidian, silently embedded in the desolate courtyard. A thin mist lingered over the lake, flowing slowly. Surrounding the lake, there were no signs of life. No trees, no water plants, only slippery mud and jagged rocks. This was the lake in the East Courtyard. The place where Nangong Wan couldn't think straight back then. Gu Qingchen felt Nangong Wan in his arms shiver slightly. She seemed to sense the environment here, her long eyelashes trembling, struggling to open a slit.
When she saw the ink-black dead stillness of the lake's surface, her pupils suddenly shrank, a choking whimper escaping her throat, filled with pain.
No, don't. She muttered unconsciously, instinctively shrinking into Gu Qingqian's embrace.
Don't be scared, we're not in the water, we're on the shore. Gu Qingqian whispered to comfort her, quickly scanning the surroundings. This was definitely not a place to linger, that breath was continuously eroding his sanity. The light of the white lantern seemed to become somewhat sluggish here, as if suppressed by an invisible force.
Must leave the lake quickly.
He looked toward the other side of the lake, where gray fog obscured the distance, making it hard to see far away.
Walk along the lake shore?
Which side would let him leave the east courtyard faster?
Just as he hesitated. Gurgle. A very faint sound of a bubble breaking came from beneath the pitch-black lake surface.
In this dead silence, the sound was terrifyingly clear.
Gu Qingqian abruptly turned to look at the lake surface.
In the center of the lake, a small bubble rose, then burst, creating a ring of nearly invisible ripples, but quickly returned to silence.
Gurgle, gurgle. Then, another, two, bubbles began to emerge one after another from deep within the lake, bursting as if something at the bottom was awakening.
The gray-white mist on the lake's surface also started to flow faster, gathering toward the center of the lake. A sense of malevolence slowly spread from the depths of the lake.
Gu Qingqian felt his scalp tingle and took several steps back, holding Nangongwan, moving away from the lake shore. The things in the lake seemed to have been disturbed by their arrival. Go, hurry up.
Nangongwan used her last bit of strength, clutching his clothes, her voice was broken and fragile.
Water, don't look, don't listen.
Gu Qingqian no longer hesitated, choosing a direction that seemed to lead away from the lake's center more quickly, moving swiftly along the wet lake shore. He had to quickly find a path or cover to leave the east courtyard.
However, the lake's abnormal changes had only just begun.
Those emerging bubbles grew more numerous and dense, ultimately forming a continuously surging area in the center of the lake, as if boiling water. The pitch-black lake water began to swirl, forming a slow but massive vortex.
In the center of the vortex, it was deep and black, like an entrance to hell.
As the vortex spun, some things began to be churned up from the lake bottom.
At first, there were pale, broken bones, then tattered clothes entangled with water plants, and finally some rotten wooden box fragments. And lastly, some blurry scenes?
Gu Qingqian caught a glimpse of those fragmented images, and his steps abruptly halted.
Among the fragmented scenes, he saw
a young girl in a pink maid outfit, kneeling by the lake, crying in despair. It was the weeping maid who had appeared multiple times. Several gray-clad, faceless servants were indifferently sinking some things with cloth bags over their heads into the lake.
The butler, wearing dark clothes, stood in the shadows in the distance, watching the lake surface with an expressionless face. Even, there were blurred figures of the Nangong lord and lady standing further away, like indifferent deities, gazing at everything. These are memories buried at the lake bottom? A tragedy that once happened by this lake?
At that moment, the vortex surged more violently. A clearer scene began to emerge. It was a young woman in a simple dress. Her face was about 6 or 7 points similar to Nangongwan, but more fragile, her eyes filled with endless sorrow. She stood by the lake, at roughly the same position Gu Qingqian was in now, looking back at the deep mansion behind her, 2 streams of tears falling from her eyes, and then, she leaped into the pitch-black lake water. In the instant she jumped in, the image magnified, clearly showing a green jade bracelet on her wrist, with seemingly tiny inscriptions carved on it. And almost simultaneously, another slightly younger figure in a red dress cried out, rushing from a distance. She tried to run to the lake's edge but was blocked by an invisible force, only able to watch helplessly as the water swallowed everything, screaming heart-wrenchingly, "Sister!" That small red-dressed figure, though her face was blurry, the despair and familiarity.
Was it Nangong Ling?
The vengeful child Shaoling.
Gu Qingqian felt struck by lightning. It turned out, it wasn't just Nangongwan who jumped into the lake. Was there someone before her? Is she her sister? And did Shaoling witness all this? Chapter 19 Goodbye Shaoling. The lantern can absorb vengeful energy, so are these swirling fragments of memory in the lake also a form of extreme vengeful accumulation? Can we feed them back to the lantern again?
Although this carries a great risk and might burst the lantern instantly, there seems to be no better way right now.
It's a gamble. Gu Qingqian's eyes flashed with determination.
He no longer tried to fight off the mental shock, but suddenly lifted the white lantern, aiming it at the swirling center of the lake filled with countless memory fragments. At the same time, he concentrated all his thoughts, not to defend, but to guide. Guide those wildly rushing memory fragments and vengeful energy towards the white lantern. Come on, isn't this what you want? It's all yours. He shouted. Boom! As if sensing his intent, the whirlpool in the center of the lake suddenly exploded. An endless stream of pitch-black lake water, filled with countless tragic memories and overwhelming vengeful thoughts, surged towards the white lantern like a roaring black dragon. The candlelight of the white lantern instantly shrank to a faint,
the entire lantern trembled violently, emitting a buzzing sound as if it could not bear the load, and cracks began to appear on its surface. Gu Qingchen felt as if his arm would be broken by this terrifying force, but he held onto the handle tightly, refusing to back down. In his arms, Nangongwan let out an unconscious pained groan. Just as the white lantern was about to completely collapse, a change occurred. The pitch-black symbol that should have been devoured by the vengeful child Shaoling and digested long ago suddenly emerged from within the lantern. It spun wildly, emitting a dark light, like an endless black hole, beginning to forcibly absorb the surging vengeful tide. This symbol, had it been lurking inside the lantern all along? The intervention of the symbol instantly shared most of the pressure. The tremors of the white lantern weakened, the cracks on the surface stopped spreading, and that faint candlelight, like a candle in the wind, stubbornly did not go out. The black torrent of vengeance was crazily absorbed by the symbol and the lantern together. The whirlpool on the lake's surface shrank visibly, the swirling memory fragments becoming blurry and vanishing. The terrifying mental shock also rapidly weakened. The entire process lasted nearly a minute. When the last trace of vengeance was absorbed, the whirlpool in the lake's center completely vanished, the pitch-black lake surface returned to a dead calm, as if everything that had just happened never occurred. Splash! The emerging symbol seemed to exhaust its strength, sinking back into the lantern, disappearing from sight. The light of the white lantern became extremely dim, with only a tiny flicker of flame dancing, as if it would extinguish at any moment. The surface of the lantern was covered with fine cracks, a shocking sight. Gu Qingchen fell to one knee on the ground, panting heavily, his forehead drenched in cold sweat, his brain still buzzing with the residual impact of those memory fragments. Nangongwan in his arms seemed to have calmed down some, no longer in so much pain, but still extremely weak and unconscious. For now, we are safe. Gu Qingchen looked at the lake surface, which had returned to silence, feeling lingering fear. This eastern courtyard lake is more bizarre and terrifying than the Ancestral Hall, it has swallowed too many things and transformed them into eternal vengeance. We must leave immediately. He struggled to stand up, ready to continue moving along the lakeshore. Suddenly a young, tender voice filled with confusion and a hint of timidity echoed from not far behind him. Big brother, sister, why did you come here? Gu Qingchen froze all over, slowly turning around. He saw the vengeful child Shaoling's small figure, which had stood on a strange rock by the lake, not knowing when she had appeared. The shadow on her face had faded considerably. Revealing half of her pale yet delicate little face, those pitch-black eyes were staring at them without blinking, lacking the previous madness and hatred, instead filled with confusion and worry. How did she escape from the master and the corpse soldiers to find her way here? And her condition seemed a bit different? Chapter 20 Fragile Alliance. Gu Qingchen tensed up all at once, instinctively shielding Nangongwan behind him. His other hand subconsciously raised the cracked white lantern, aiming it at the suddenly appearing vengeful child, Shaoling. The atmosphere instantly tensed again. Shaoling seemed pricked by Gu Qingchen's defensive action, her small body shrank back slightly, and her feet, perched on the strange rock, stopped swaying. A hint of grievance flashed in those pitch-black eyes, as the brief confusion and worry from before seemed to dissipate. Big brother. Her voice became softer, carrying a hint of timidity. Do you want to use the lantern to illuminate Shaoling, like those bad people do? Gu Qingchen's heart suddenly constricted. Shaoling's behavior at this moment resembled that of a frightened, insecure child, rather than the terrifying vengeful child who had stirred bloodshed in the Ancestral Hall. Did her transformation occur after she consumed the talisman and absorbed some of the resentment from the lake? Or was it because she saw the memory fragments in the lake that triggered some forgotten emotions? He dared not relax his guard but instinctively softened his tone. Shaoling, how did you end up here? What about those people outside? He referred to the master and the corpse soldiers. Shaoling tilted her head, the faint shadow on her face wavered again, as if remembering something painful. Outside, there are many bad people, they hit Shaoling, it hurt a lot. Shaoling got angry, so I fought back, then I felt a really uncomfortable smell from here, also, a smell of sister. She stretched out a pale little finger, first pointing at the dark surface of the lake, then towards Nangongwan in Gu Qingchen's arms. Shaoling just followed the smell here. As she spoke, her pitch-black eyes turned towards the unconscious Nangongwan, showing a complex expression filled with concern and reliance. There seemed to be a trace of barely noticeable guilt. Sister, what's wrong with her? She seems to be disappearing. Her perception was incredibly sharp, sensing Nangongwan's extremely weak spiritual energy. Gu Qingchen's thoughts raced. Shaoling's state was very unstable, but at this moment, she seemed temporarily free from that murderous state. Perhaps they could try to use this? After all, they now had a common enemy. Master Nangong. Your sister was gravely injured while trying to save me. Gu Qingchen chose to tell the truth while carefully observing Shaoling's reaction. We need to leave here immediately and find a safe place to help her, otherwise, she might really disappear. Disappear? Shaoling's pupils constricted slightly, the word clearly triggered a deep-rooted fear within her. She suddenly jumped down from the strange rock, barefoot on the black mud, but didn't mind at all. She eagerly took 2 steps forward. No, sister can't disappear, not like. Her words were left unfinished, but Gu Qingchen understood her meaning, not to disappear like that sister in the lake. Then can you help us? Gu Qingchen asked tentatively. Help us leave the east courtyard and return to our room? He deliberately emphasized our room, trying to reinforce the hint that we are on the same side. Shaoling's face showed signs of struggle. She seemed to dread leaving the east courtyard, fearing the outside world and having a deeply rooted fear of the master. Outside, there are bad people, father, he will. She mumbled softly, her body trembling slightly. But if we stay here, your father will soon come looking for us. By then, we will all be captured and your sister will disappear, and you might be locked back in that dark ancestral hall again. He used the simplest pros and cons analysis, and the fear of darkness to guide her. Shaoling's breathing became rapid, her dark eyes filled with fear. She looked at the unconscious Nangongwan, then at Gu Qingchen, and finally, with fear, glanced at the direction across the lake. Shaoling. Shaoling is scared, she hugged her arms, like a helpless child. Don't be afraid. Gu Qingchen tried hard to make his voice sound reliable. We have a lantern. He shook the lantern in his hand, though broken, it still emitted a steady dim light. And we can think of a way together. You know the way, right? You know how to avoid your father and sneak back, right? He gave her some initiative. Shaoling's gaze was attracted by that weak light, she seemed to draw a little courage from it. She hesitated for a long time, long enough that Gu Qingchen thought she would refuse, before she gently nodded. Shaoling. Know some small paths, very few people know, her voice was as soft as a mosquito. But father is very powerful, his eyes are everywhere. Surveillance was all around. This matched the feeling of Lord Nangong given to people. We will be careful. Gu Qingchen encouraged her. As long as you take us back to the room, we might be able to temporarily avoid your father. The bridal chamber had special rules, the Lord had indeed not barged in before. Shaoling thought again and finally made up her mind. She raised her head, a hint of determination flashing in her dark eyes. Okay. Shaoling will take you. But... Big brother, you have to promise Shaoling. You cannot leave Shaoling. Cannot take away the lantern. She made a condition, still longing for the light, but it also revealed great insecurity. I promise you. Gu Qingchen nodded seriously. As long as you don't harm us, we won't leave you, and the lantern will let you get close. He clarified the bottom line again. Shaoling will not harm you. Shaoling whispered a promise, then turned around, pointing to a direction on the lake shore covered by a lot of dry vines and strange rocks. Over there is a very small hole that leads to an abandoned drainage ditch. Follow the ditch, it can bypass the main courtyard. Gu Qingchen no longer hesitated, picked up Nangongwan, and closely followed Shaoling. Shaoling's figure was ethereal, she led the way in front, moving extremely cautiously. She occasionally stopped, listened carefully, or used her dark eyes to vigilantly scan the surroundings, especially the shadowy corners. Gu Qingchen followed closely, his spirit highly focused, the white lantern's light minimized, only illuminating a small patch of road beneath their feet. There was no conversation along the way, only the faint sound of footsteps on the mud or gravel, and the suppressed breathing of the three. The atmosphere was as tense as a taut string. The eastern courtyard seemed extremely vast, and the layout was strange. It felt like they hadn't walked far, yet it seemed they had circled through many twists and turns. The surrounding scene remained desolate and dead, enveloped in a faint gray fog. Occasionally, distant sounds of patrolling servants could be heard, but Shaoling detected them in advance, cleverly guiding Gu Qingchen to hide in the shadows to avoid detection. This small path was indeed very hidden, if not for Shaoling leading, it would be impossible to find. Gu Qingchen felt slightly at ease. Shaoling's performance at this moment truly seemed like a reliable ally. In his arms, Nangongwan was still unconscious, her breathing weak but seemed to have stabilized for now, not worsening. After walking for almost half an hour, the scene ahead finally began to change. Chapter 21, The Farce Should End. The desolate lakeside scenery was gradually replaced by broken courtyard walls and the ruins of abandoned buildings. They seemed to be leaving the core area of the eastern courtyard. Shaoling slowed down, she pointed to a collapsed half of a rockery ahead. If we pass through there, we will be west, a little further, it's behind the courtyard where you are staying. Her voice carried exhaustion, maintaining this leading role clearly drained her a good deal of strength. Hope was right ahead. Gu Qingchen quickened his pace, heading towards the ruins of the fake mountain. However, just as they were about to pass through a gap in the fake mountain, a soft thud. A sound like a water droplet hitting the ground came from a dark corner on the side. Shaoling immediately reacted, she abruptly stopped, her small body tensing up,
her pitch-black eyes intensely fixed on that direction. A threatening growl rumbled from her throat. Gu Qingchen also stopped at once, holding his breath, protecting Nan Gongwan, his sharp gaze scanning the darkness. In the darkness, a small outline shifted slightly. Then, a timid female voice emerged, soft and shaky. Miss. Is it really you? I am. Xiaotsue. With the voice, a figure in a pink maid outfit, tear-streaked and trembling, slowly emerged from the dark corner. It was the maid who had appeared multiple times before. How did she end up here? In this abandoned spot at the edge of the eastern courtyard? Shaoling's threatening stance decreased slightly, but her caution remained. She tilted her head, dark eyes scrutinizing the maid as if trying to recognize her. Gu Qingchen furrowed his brows tightly. The timing and place of this maid's appearance were just too coincidental. Friend or foe? Xiaotsue? Gu Qingchen asked, his voice steady but filled with scrutiny. Why are you here? The maid Xiaotsue seemed startled to see Gu Qingchen, quickly lowering her head, her voice trembling. See cousin. I sneaked out. I heard that the master was furious and wanted to send people searching everywhere for you and the miss. I was worried, wanted to come to the eastern courtyard to take a look. I didn't expect to actually run into you. Her words were a jumble, but she seemed to have come out of concern for them, to relay a warning. Searching? Yes. Xiaotsue nodded timidly, glancing around quickly and lowering her voice. The master is very angry, said you destroyed the Ancestral hall, let that one go, even took the miss away. The guard team has already set out, going to search the various courtyards. They might search over here soon. Her message seemed to confirm Gu Qingchen's worst fears. The master reacted quickly, a large-scale search had already begun. Why do you want to help us? Gu Qingchen directly questioned, his gaze fiercely locked on her. In this Nangong residence, he dared not easily trust any kindness. Xiaotsue shivered under his gaze, tears falling down. I just think the miss is suffering too much. Cousin, you seem to be good to the miss. I don't want to see the miss locked up again or... Her words carried a heartfelt sob, not sounding false at all. Moreover, she had repeatedly shown sympathy towards Nangongwan before. Shaoling also seemed to relax her guard. She appeared to hold no hostility towards this weeping maid, only irritably murmuring. Crybaby, so noisy. Gu Qingchen quickly weighed his options. Leaving this maid behind could expose their whereabouts. But letting her go could cause the same trouble. Perhaps, it was best to take her with them for now? She seemed more familiar with the situation inside the residence, perhaps she could provide more information. Come with us. Gu Qingchen made his decision. But if you dare make any movements. He didn't finish, but his cold gaze already said it all. Xiaotsue turned pale, quickly nodding vigorously. I wouldn't dare, I absolutely wouldn't dare. I just want to help the miss and cousin. Thus, the small team gained a new member. A weeping maid. Under Shaoling's lead, the four of them cautiously made their way through the fake mountain ruins, officially entering the western side of Nangong residence. Although the buildings here were still ancient, they lacked the desolation of the eastern courtyard and bore more signs of life. They wove along extremely remote corners, avoiding the occasional sound of patrolling footsteps. With the addition of Xiaotsue, her familiarity with the road conditions and patrolling patterns indeed played a role, warning them in advance several times to avoid direct conflict. They were getting closer and closer to the small courtyard where the wedding chamber was located. Hope was right in front of them. However, just as they were crossing the last dilapidated corridor connecting to the backyard, about to reach the back door of the small courtyard. At the end of the corridor, illuminated by the moonlight, a figure wearing dark clothing and holding a white lantern stood quietly there, as if waiting for a long time. It was not the butler. But, it was Master Nangong himself. His gaunt face showed no expression, and his cold eyes were staring fiercely at the four people walking out of the dark corridor. He actually blocked the way himself. Had enough fun? The master's hoarse voice slowly emerged, devoid of any emotion, yet it made the surrounding temperature drop sharply. This farce should come to an end. Chapter 22, Mutation. Had enough fun? This farce should come to an end. Gu Qingchen only felt an enormous pressure coming at him. The arm around Nangongwan instinctively tightened. The situation he least wanted to face had indeed happened. The master had taken action personally and directly blocked the last escape route. The maid Xiaotsue behind him let out a whimper, her legs going weak, almost collapsing to the ground, barely propped up by the decaying corridor pillar beside her. Her body trembled like she had Parkinson's disease. The reaction from the resentful child, Shaoling, was the most intense. Upon hearing the master's voice and seeing his figure, Shaoling instantly puffed up like an angry cat, her small body arching fiercely. A threatening low growl escaped her throat,
and the restlessness in her dark eyes surged fiercely again. Rich black mist uncontrollably emanated from her body. Bad guy. Old cheat. She screamed sharply, her voice filled with deep-seated hatred. Don't come over, don't grab my sister. Don't touch Big Brother's lantern. She seemed to forget her earlier fear, instinctively placing herself in front of Gu Qingchen and Nan Gongwan. Though her body was trembling slightly, facing the master, she clearly had a deep psychological shadow. The master's gaze slowly swept over Shaoling, carrying a hint of undisguised disgust. You little monster, swallowing my talisman, destroying my ancestral hall, and still daring to show yourself. It seems you haven't suffered enough from the past. His words struck Shaoling like a whip, causing the black mist around her to churn violently, and her shrieks to become even more piercing, mingled with more pain. Gu Qingchen's mind raced. Forcing a hard fight was definitely a dead end. The master's strength was unfathomable. Even with the unstable Shaoling, they had no chance of victory. He had to be clever, had to find his weakness, or use the rules against him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down, his gaze meeting the master's. Father, your words are mistaken. Qingchen is not playing, but following the rules of the residence, fulfilling the responsibility entrusted by you to guard the ancestral hall. Now that the time has come, Qingchen is about to take Wanner back to report. Where is there any farce? Once again, he raised rules and fulfilling orders as shields, trying to gain even a bit of initiative in words. The master's eyes slightly shifted, landing on Gu Qingchen's face, the corners of his mouth seeming to curl into a hint of mockery. You have a silver tongue. Guarding the ancestral hall? Where is the talisman? The ancestral hall is currently filled with resentment, on the verge of collapse. Is this what you call guarding? The talisman has been devoured by the unclean thing within the ancestral hall. Gu Qingchen's face remained unchanged as he directly shifted the blame onto the resentful child, subtly implying that the master already knew what was in the ancestral hall. Qingchen's abilities were lacking, and he could not stop it, but I have done my utmost to ensure that both myself and Wanner return safely. Father initially only requested that the talisman be intact and the ancestral hall peaceful until dawn. It was never stated what unexpected events would occur during the process. Now that Qingchen and Wanner have returned, should this also be considered a forced completion of the result of returning? He was changing the concept and forcing an explanation. But he was betting that this old man must, to some extent, follow some kind of logic or rules of language. The old man indeed fell silent for a moment, his eyes deep as if assessing Gu Qingchen's words. At this moment, Nan Gongwan, who was protected in Gu Qingchen's arms, seemed to be stimulated by the tense atmosphere outside, emitting an extremely faint painful groan, her long eyelashes shaking violently as if struggling to wake up. Her reaction instantly drew everyone's attention. The old man's gaze immediately shifted to her. In his cold eyes, there seemed to be a hint of greed. He noticed Nan Gongwan's nearly transparent state. Wanner. The old man's voice was still hoarse, but it slowed a bit. With a chilling concern, he said, it seems you have suffered quite a bit. Is it for this outsider? How ungrateful. His words seemed to express regret, but were actually full of schemes. Shaoling became more anxious and restless. She seemed to sense the old man's ill intentions toward Nan Gongwan. The black energy surrounding her condensed into shadowy claws, baring its teeth at the old man. Gu Qingchen's heart was in his throat. The old man's unusual interest in Nan Gongwan was certainly not a good sign. No need for father to worry. Gu Qingchen forcefully interrupted. Wanner is just a bit tired, she can recover after resting. Recover? The old man gently repeated, his voice carrying a strange meaning. Yes, she needs to really recover, return to where she should be. His words were profound, as if hinting at something. Gu Qingchen was about to continue to negotiate. Suddenly, a shocking change occurred. The unconscious Nan Gongwan suddenly opened her eyes wide. But those were no longer the gentle obsidian-like eyes Gu Qingchen was familiar with. Instead, they were a pair of completely transformed silver-white eyes. Cold, hollow, devoid of any emotion, as if the moon hanging high in the sky was indifferently gazing down upon all beings. At the same time, an extremely powerful ancient aura burst forth from her weak body. This aura was so vast, so different from her earlier state, that it instantly dispersed the black mist of resentment emanating from Shaoling. It even made the white lantern in the old man's hand flicker violently for a moment. Gu Qingchen was nearly knocked off balance by this sudden force, looking down at Nan Gongwan in shock. Nan Gongwan slowly floated out of Gu Qingchen's embrace, hovering in midair. Her clothes moved without wind, her pale face showing no expression. Those silver-white eyes first coldly scanned the terrified Xiao Chui, then landed on the baring teeth and low growl of Shaoling. Shaoling was hit by her silver gaze, as if scalded, quickly retracting all of her black energy. Letting out a whimper filled with fear, she instinctively took half a step back and hid behind Gu Qingchen, peeking out with just half her head to secretly observe. Finally, those silver-white eyes fixed on the old man Nan Gong at the end of the corridor. Locked by this pair of silver eyes, the previously calm Nan Gong old man's face changed visibly for the first time. It was a look of disbelief, and a hint of deep dread. You actually. The old man's voice trembled for the first time, his withered fingers even curling slightly. How is it possible to wake up at this moment? The floating Nan Gong Wan gave no response. She simply raised one pale hand, the fingertips surrounded by a layer of moonlight-like glow. She gently pointed in the direction of the old man. No sound, no explosion of light and shadow. Chapter 23, Talent Upgrade. Those cold, emotionless eyes fell on Gu Qingchen, as if the cold current from the night sky instantly froze him. That was not the gaze of Nan Gong Wan, absolutely not. It was a higher dimensional stare, as if humanity looked down on ants, devoid of any emotion. Gu Qingchen's muscles were tense to the limit, his heart nearly stopping. He had no doubt that as long as this presence occupying Wanner's body moved a finger, he would instantly turn to dust. Even the existence that the old master Nangong feared had power beyond measure. He forced himself to stand still, neither retreating nor making any gesture that could be misunderstood as hostility. He simply gazed quietly at those silver eyes, striving to maintain a calm surface, though his heart was a raging storm. Time seemed to stand still. The little bell hidden behind Gu Qingchen didn't dare to make a sound, trembling as if wishing to shrink into a shadow. He didn't know whether seconds or minutes passed. The floating Nangong Wan's silver-white eyes slightly fluctuated, like a stone thrown into a calm lake. The ancient aura surrounding her also revealed a hint of stagnation. She slightly lowered her head, looking at the hand she had raised, which was surrounded by faint moonlight, a trace of subtle confusion. It seemed that this body and this power were a bit unfamiliar to her. At that moment of stasis in the aura, a voice, extremely weak and belonging to Nangong Wan, groaned in pain as it escaped her lips. Her silver eyes flickered violently like a faulty lamp, the silver and familiar obsidian black alternating crazily. The moonlight aura around her also became extremely unstable, flickering unpredictably. Wan Gu Qingchen caught this subtle change and tentatively called out again, his voice dry. Husband, run quickly. Nangong Wan's voice struggled out, intermittent and filled with urgency, but it was quickly suppressed by that will, her silver eyes regaining control, but clearly less stable than before. She was fighting for control of her body. And it seemed she was at a disadvantage, but her struggle clearly interfered with that presence. An opportunity. Gu Qingchen's mind raced. He couldn't fight hard, nor could he abandon her to flee. He had to do something to help her. His gaze instantly locked onto the dull white lantern in his hand. This lantern could absorb resentment, provide stability, and even soothe the resentful little bell to some extent. It seemed to have a special effect on anything related to souls. He was taking a gamble. Gu Qingchen no longer hesitated, suddenly raising the broken white lantern high, trying to shine that weak light towards the unstable Nangong Wan. Wanner! Look at the light! Come back! He shouted, concentrating all his will on this lantern that was connected to his fate. The lantern's light shone on the moonlight aura surrounding Nangong Wan, surprisingly creating no conflict but instead acting like some sort of soothing presence. The moonlight seemed to strongly repel this low-level light. It trembled slightly, wanting to push it away, but the remaining consciousness of Nangong Wan clung to it like a lifeline, instinctively drawing warmth from that faint glow. Mum. Nangong Wan let out a muffled grunt, the frequency of her flickering silver eyes increasing. The expression on her face began to show subtle struggle, sometimes cold and indifferent, other times in painful distortion. Effective. Gu Qingchen's heart shook, striving to maintain the lantern's glow, even as the lantern itself approached its limit, cracks seemingly spreading. Sister? The little bell also sensed the change, timidly peeking out to look at the struggling Nangong Wan, her dark eyes full of worry. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, then cautiously reached out a little hand. Following that, a relatively peaceful stream of black resentment extended out, slowly encircling the other side of Nangong Wan. The resentment from the same origin seems to play a peculiar balancing role. Under the influence of two forces. Nangong Wan let out a short cry of pain, her silver eyes quickly retreating like a receding tide, turning back into familiar obsidian black. Although Nangong Wan was filled with exhaustion and pain, her consciousness was undoubtedly her own. The halo of moonlight around her body instantly contracted back into her, disappearing without a trace. She lost her floating power and, feeling weak, fell from midair. Gu Qingchen was already prepared, taking a swift step forward, securely catching her in his arms. The touch was icy and frighteningly light, as if she were just an empty shell. She leaned weakly against him, her eyes barely open, her breath faint, lacking even the strength to speak. Only her gaze conveyed a sense of relief for having survived a disaster. That terrifying existence was temporarily suppressed back. Gu Qingchen let out a long breath, feeling his back already soaked with cold sweat. The brief standoff just now was far more dangerous than everything that had happened in the Ancestral Hall and Donyuan Lake combined. He glanced at the white lantern in his hand, its flickering flame now barely the size of a rice grain, with cracks spreading across it, as if it would shatter completely at the slightest touch. But after all, it still held on. He looked over at the somewhat flustered Shaoling beside him, nodding, "Thank you." Shaoling seemed a bit embarrassed, shyly retracting her hand, mumbling softly, "Shaoling doesn't want sister to disappear." The crisis was temporarily resolved. Gu Qingchen dared not stay here any longer. Although the master had retreated, he could strike back at any moment. He glanced at the fainted maid, Xiao Chui, hesitated briefly, and then bent down to hoist her onto his other shoulder. This maid, although timid, had indeed provided help earlier and could not be left behind. Then, holding the weak Nangong Wan in his arms and carrying Xiao Chui, he said to Shaoling, "Shaoling, lead the way back to the room, quickly." Shaoling nodded vigorously, immediately leading the way this time without hiding, rushing at full speed toward the nearby back door of the courtyard. Fortunately, until they passed through the abandoned little courtyard and returned to the inner corridor of the bedroom through the concealed back door, they did not encounter any further obstacles. It seemed that the master had indeed temporarily given up on intercepting them. Creak. Pushing open the familiar door, a rich aroma of red candles and warmth rushed over, as if isolating all external danger. Gu Qingchen finally felt a moment of genuine safety. First, he placed the unconscious Xiao Chui on a soft couch in the corner, then carefully laid Nangong Wan on the bed, tucking her in with the pair of embroidered mandarin duck blankets. As soon as Nangong Wan touched the bed, she almost instantly sank into a deep coma, her body cold, but her breath seemed to stabilize a little. Chapter 24, The Past. Inside the bridal chamber, the red candles quietly burned, the fragrance lingering, temporarily isolating the dangers from the outside. Gu Qingchen sat at the edge of the bed, feeling a new power within him called rule control. It was not filled with destructive desire like rule collapse, but rather a more restrained feeling, as if beneath the surface of the world before him, countless invisible lines became vaguely visible. As long as he wished, he could touch, analyze, or even manipulate them. But this power also came with a warning: every use was bound to bring corresponding backlash. He first turned his gaze to the still unconscious Nangong Wan on the bed. Analyze her condition? The thought had just emerged when he felt an indescribable sense of risk, as if gazing into an unfathomable whirlpool. Forcing an analysis might attract the attention of that silverite existence, possibly leading to its awakening again. Not feasible, at least not now. He shifted his gaze to the almost shattered white lantern in his hand. Analyze it? The thought stirred slightly, and the talent of rule control quietly began to operate. A stream of information flowed into his mind like a gentle trickle. Item: soul lantern, damaged. Source: secret recipe of Nangong Mansion. Rule characteristics. 1. Radiant soul piece, emits a stable glow, can protect the soul body, resist the invasion of evil spirits, maintain rationality. The intensity of the glow is related to the completeness of the soul lantern and the energy fullness. 2. Absorb grievance continuation, can absorb specific grievances, in energy, and fragments of soul power to transform into its own energy to sustain burning. Current conversion efficiency, low, due to body damage. 3. The lamp exists with the person, core rule bound to the soul of the holder. If the lamp goes out, the person dies, based on the current instance rule system. 4. Some rules cannot be analyzed due to damage or insufficient authority. Status: severely damaged, energy nearing depletion, core rules barely maintained. Repair suggestion: requires a large amount of pure in energy or source soul power for nourishment and repairs of the body's cracks. Indeed. This lantern is more complex than he imagined. It is not just a tool, it is directly tied to his survival. Fixing it is urgent. Pure in energy? Source soul power? Where to find it? His gaze inevitably turned to the door. Little Ling was squatting by the door, curiously poking the red carpet on the ground with her pale fingers, as if fascinated by the soft texture. What radiates from her is pure resentment and in energy, but it clearly cannot be absorbed directly. It needs the lantern's conversion, and the efficiency is currently very low. Source soul power. Could it refer to Nangong Wan's? But she is extremely weak right now. Gu Qingchen sighed, temporarily setting aside the task of repairing the lantern. He shifted his gaze to the still unconscious Xiao Chui on the soft couch. Analyze her? The thought stirred again. Target: Xiao Chui, low-ranking maid of Nangong Mansion. Status: soul frightened, temporarily sealed. Rule association: employed by Nangong Mansion, must comply with the rules for servants within the mansion. Specific rule content needs additional analysis, but information fragments, long-term subjected to fear and oppression, sympathetic towards Nangong Wan, aware of some trivial matters and rumors in the mansion. Fragmented memories exist about lake sacrifice, young lady, and Miss Ling. Deep information extraction can be conducted, requires contact with the target, may cause a slight burden on her soul, but indeed, this little maid knows something about the lake sacrifice, the young lady, and little Ling. Deep extraction? It might hurt her. Gu Qingchen hesitated and chose not to act for now. Let's wait for her to wake up naturally. Finally, he looked at little Ling. Analyze the grievance, child? This thought just arose, and a sense of risk swept over him again, though not as strong as when analyzing Nangon Wan, but still not light. Little Ling's state is extremely unstable. Forcing an analysis could provoke her again, leading to unpredictable consequences. It seems that rule control is not all-powerful. For targets with far greater power or special status, the risks and difficulties of analysis are immense. As he pondered, the unconscious Xiao Chui on the soft couch let out a faint groan, her eyelashes fluttering as she slowly opened her eyes. At first, she looked confused at the ceiling, then suddenly remembered something, and sat up in fright, seeing Nangon Wan on the bed, Gu Qingchen beside her, and the little figure at the door. Ah! She gasped briefly, hurriedly covering her mouth, curling up in fear, looking at little Ling. Little Ling jumped at her sudden scream, giving her an unhappy glare, bared her teeth, and let out a low growl. But there was no intention of attack, rather, it resembled a child's displeasure at being disturbed. Don't be afraid. Gu Qingchen spoke, his voice steady as much as possible. She means no harm for now. She is the one who brought us back here. Do you remember? Xiao Chui paused, fear slightly easing, trying to recall, seeming to remember some fragments before her faint, nodding timidly. I remember some. The master, he has temporarily left. Gu Qingchen said. We are relatively safe now. Xiao Chui, I need to ask you some things, about this mansion, about the lake festival, and the eldest lady, as well as Miss Ling. He directly pointed out the keywords. Xiao Chui heard these few words, her face instantly turned pale, her eyes evasive, not daring to look at Gu Qingchen, nor at Shaoling. I don't know anything. I know nothing. She denied instinctively, a self-protection formed under long-term fear. Gu Qingchen did not push her, just quietly looked at her, while using a hint of the ability called rule control, not to forcibly extract information, but to create a faint atmosphere of trust and, it's safer to speak, influencing her subconscious. This was a shallow application of his new talent, with minimal backlash. Xiao Chui. His voice carried a reassuring power. You also saw, the master wants to harm the young lady, wants to harm me. We are now on the same boat. Only by understanding more can we possibly survive, even help the young lady, help people like Miss Ling. You wouldn't want to see anyone suffer like them again, right? His words, combined with that faint hint, broke through Xiao Chui's psychological defenses. She lifted her head, glanced at the unconscious Nangon Wan on the bed, and quickly shot a glance at Shaoling, who was curiously tugging at the curtain tassel at the door, her eyes flickering with a trace of sympathy and struggle. After a long silence, she finally stammered, her voice lowered as if she feared being overheard. The lake festival. I heard it, from an old maid a long time ago, saying, every few years, the mansion must send a young lady to the lake, said it was to calm something, bless the family. Chapter 25, Ultimately, you were discovered. Take the initiative. These 4 words fell on Nangon Wan, Shaoling, and Xiao Chui. Their reactions varied. Husband, where should we start? Nangon Wan asked softly, her voice weak, but carrying a hint of determination. Gu Qingchen's gaze swept across the room, finally landing on the almost shattered guiding lamp. The first priority is to repair it, that's our greatest reliance right now. He looked at Shaoling. Shaoling, can you sense in this mansion, where is the dark energy or the similar source soul power most concentrated and pure? He changed to a phrase that might be easier for Shaoling to understand. Shaoling tilted her head, the dark light in her eyes flickering, as if she was trying hard to sense something. She stretched out her pale little finger, pointed to the east, the direction of the east courtyard lake, then immediately drew back as if she had touched something hot, a look of disgust and fear on her face. For a moment she pointed to the ground, mumbling, below, there's a lot of noise. Eventually, she hesitated and pointed in a particular direction. It was towards a deeper part of the courtyard. Over there, seems to have a place, the smell is a little bit like sister, but it's also a bit different, stuffy. She struggled to describe it, lacking vocabulary, but the meaning was roughly clear. Like Nangon Wan, but also different? Stuffy? Gu Qingchen's heart stirred. Could it be a place similar to Nangon Wan's bloodline origin? The Nangong family ancestral hall? Or a secret chamber for storing some important items? Can you take us there? Quietly. Gu Qingchen asked. Shaoling nodded vigorously, Shaoling knows a shortcut. Miss. Young master, over there, seems to be direction of the master's study and the inner treasury, heavily guarded. Xiao Chui said. The master's study? Gu Qingchen recalled the oppressive study room he was summoned to before. There could indeed be secrets hidden there, but it was also undoubtedly a den of danger. No worries, we won't take the main path. Gu Qingchen looked at Shaoling. It's up to you. The plan was tentatively set. But before setting off,
They needed to restore their state as much as possible. Gu Qingchen let Nan Gongwan continue resting while he sat cross-legged, trying to familiarize himself and recover the mental power after using the rule control talent. He discovered that although the talent had upgraded, the mental power consumption was also greater. And that intangible feeling of backlash always shadowed him, reminding him not to abuse it. Shaoling curiously wandered around the room, but still kept her distance from the red candles and the laid-out red items, as if she didn't quite like the overly warm color scheme. Xiao Chui was restless, glancing at the door one moment and then at Gu Qingchen the next, afraid that the master would break in at any second. Time passed in silence. After about an hour, Nan Gongwan's complexion improved a little, although still weak, she was able to sit up steadily by herself. Gu Qingchen's mental strength had also basically fully recovered. It was time to act. Xiao Chui, you stay here. Gu Qingchen instructed. If someone comes, try to buy time, or create some noise as a warning. Xiao Chui's face went pale, but she still nodded tremulously. I will do my best. Gu Qingchen then looked at Nan Gongwan. Can you do it? Nan Gongwan nodded firmly. I can. I am familiar with this place, and perhaps I can avoid some unnecessary trouble. Although her strength had not recovered, her experience as a local might come in handy. Finally, he looked at Shaoling. Shaoling was already impatiently waiting. Seeing him look over, she immediately floated to the door, ready to set out at any moment. Gu Qingchen took a deep breath, picking up the dimly glowing soul-guiding lamp. Let's go. The three of them quietly slipped out of the room. Shaoling led the way, guiding them through obscure corridors and the corners of abandoned courtyards. Nan Gongwan followed closely behind, her body seemed to blend into the shadows, moving silently. Gu Qingchen, relying on his quick reflexes and agility, barely kept up. With Shaoling as a living map and Nan Gongwan as a lightning rod, they managed to perfectly avoid all patrolling corpse soldiers and servants, gradually penetrating deeper into the core area of the Nangong residence. The surrounding buildings grew more magnificent and ancient, intricately carved, yet also more eerie. The pressure in the air became heavier. Finally, Shaoling stopped in the shadow behind a very secluded rockery, pointing to a tall and solemn black-roofed building ahead. It's over there, the smell comes from below. Shaoling whispered, a hint of vigilance in her dark eyes. There are some nasty things guarding outside. Gu Qingchen focused his gaze. The doors of that building were tightly shut, covered in complicated symbols, and on either side stood two grotesque stone sculptures of demons, wielding tridents, with blue faces and sharp tusks. It was indeed a crucial location. Can we go around the front? Gu Qingchen asked quietly. Shaoling shook her head. Below, it seems the entrance is only inside. This made things tricky. Breaking in forcefully was definitely not an option. Gu Qingchen used rule manipulation, again, attempting to analyze the two stone demon figures and the symbols on the gate. Fragments of information came in slowly. Guardian stone puppet, low-level construct, trigger-based attack, perceives life signs and malice, symbols, alarm, strength, exorcism. Rule flaw, stone puppets sense based on life signs and malice, symbols react weakly to malice-free similar life signs. No malice similar life signs? Gu Qingchen's gaze turned to Nan Gongwan. She was a young lady of the Nangong family, and her aura was naturally similar. As long as she had no intent to attack in her heart, perhaps she could deceive the symbols? The stone puppet sensed life and malice. Shaoling was a vengeful child, neither dead nor alive. When her malice was concealed, she might be able to fool him too? As for himself? He was a living person, malice could be restrained, but life signs. He suddenly looked at the soul-guiding lamp in his hand. This lantern could protect soul bodies and isolate malevolent spirits. Could it also, to a certain extent, obscure his own life signs? It was worth a try. He whispered his thoughts to the two women. I'll give it a try. Nan Gongwan nodded, trying hard to calm her mind and keep herself steady. She walked towards the big door, her steps light and natural, as if she were just returning home. As she approached, the symbols on the door flickered slightly, as if scanning her presence. But after feeling her pure Nangong family bloodline aura and without malice, the radiance dimmed again. The eyes of the two stone puppets turned slightly, focusing on her for a moment before slowly returning to silence. Effective. Nan Gongwan successfully walked to the front of the gate, giving him a slight nod. Next is Shaoling. She felt a bit nervous, trying to imitate Nan Gongwan, struggling to pull back the resentment and murderous intent into her body, tiptoeing like an ordinary little girl as she walked over. The stone puppet's eyes turned again, scanning her strange state of neither living nor dead, seeming a bit confused, but ultimately did not trigger an attack. Chapter 26 Awakening. That voice seemed to come from a distant place, echoing in the narrow stone chamber. Gu Qingchen's muscles instantly tensed, almost ready to activate his talent or pull the two girls to retreat. Nan Gongwan's face also turned white, instinctively moving closer to Gu Qingchen. Shaoling bared her teeth and growled threateningly, a surge of dark energy enveloping her as she stood in front of the two, facing the figure turned away from them. However, after that figure spoke, it fell back into silence, standing still as if what had just happened was merely an illusion. Gu Qingchen forced himself to calm down, his rule control talent operating at full power, carefully sensing that figure. The feedback information was extremely strange. It was indeed a hollow shell, residual Nangong Qing's aura, but the core was empty, more like a battery or anchor point used to maintain the operation of the formation, lacking complete consciousness and mobility. The voice just now might have been a preset warning mechanism, or perhaps, the real body far away transmitted it through some means? His gaze quickly swept across the enormous and eerie formation on the ground, especially those three floating light orbs. The eerie blue resentment soul, Nangong Ling, the moonlight white divine soul fragment, and that faint golden human soul, Nangong Qing's real body, about to collapse. The truth was cruel enough to chill the heart. Nangong Qing sacrificed his daughter, Nangong Ling, to prolong his existence, stealing fragments from unknown deities, and might even target Nangong Wan as his next goal or vessel. Something must be done. Destroy this formation? Or husband. Nangong Wan's voice trembled, her gaze fixed on that moonlight white orb, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. That, I feel, it's calling me, familiar, yet so terrifying. Gu Qingchen's mind raced. Nangong Wan shares the same source with that divine soul fragment, perhaps, she could influence or even absorb it? But the risk was enormous, likely leading to the awakening of that silver-eyed being again. The other choice was that eerie blue resentment soul. Shaoling was right here, this was her stripped core, and if it could be returned. Just as he weighed the options quickly. Buzz. The entire stone chamber shook violently. The formation lines on the ground suddenly burst into glaring blood-red light. Those three light orbs began to vibrate violently, flickering as if they were receiving huge interference. Especially that faint golden human soul orb, its brightness dimming sharply, as if it would extinguish completely in the next second. Ugh! That master shell turned away from them and let out a painful scream that didn't sound like a human's voice, countless cracks appearing on its surface, and dark red energy leaking out wildly. Almost simultaneously, Gu Qingchen felt an immense will forcefully crashing against the stone chamber's barrier from afar. It was Nangong Qing's real body. He sensed the anomaly here, trying to forcibly break back in or remotely strengthen the formation. Not good. He has discovered. Gu Qingchen's face changed. Bad guy. The old trickster is coming. Shaoling also sensed that hateful will, jumping up anxiously. There was no time to hesitate. Shaoling. Gu Qingchen made a decision on the spot, pointing at that eerie blue light orb. That is your thing, go get it back. Shaoling paused for a moment. Looking at that deep blue light ball, confusion first surfaced in her dark eyes, followed quickly by an extreme longing that came from instinct. That was her lost core, the source of her pain and strength. Mine. She screamed, no longer caring about fear, transforming into a red shadow, and dashed towards the deep blue light ball. Waner. Gu Qingchen looked at Nangong Wan again, his tone hurried. Try to communicate with that white one, if it feels wrong, stop immediately. Trust me. Nangong Wan stared at the moonwhite light ball, biting her pale lower lip, a flash of determination appearing in her eyes. She sat cross-legged, closed her eyes, and tried to connect her soul thought with that familiar yet strange shard of divine soul. Gu Qingchen took a quick step towards the pale golden human soul light ball. This was Nangong Qing's origin, also one of the core drives of this formation. If he could disturb or even destroy it, he would surely deal a heavy blow to Nangong Qing. He raised the soul guiding lamp in his hand, trying to burn that pale golden light ball with the lamp's light. Hiss, hiss. The light shone on it, unexpectedly fueling the flame, making the light ball flicker more violently, and the entire formation began to shake unsteadily. Effective. But this seemed to accelerate its collapse and might provoke a more ferocious counterattack. The information fragments provided by rule control indicated that a direct attack could trigger the self-destruct mechanism of the formation. It had to be more subtle. Gu Qingchen's eyes sharpened, changing strategy. He no longer attempted to destroy but used his talent to start carefully analyzing and twisting the part of the formation pattern connected to the pale golden light ball. He wanted to temporarily cut off or reverse Nangong Qing's maintenance of his origin through this empty shell and formation. This was an extremely delicate and dangerous operation that required an extraordinary understanding and control of the rules. The power of rule control EX-level talent was pushed to the limit. Gu Qingchen's forehead bulged with veins, and his mental power burst forth like a flood. An invisible backlash began to squeeze his soul, bringing sharp pain like needles. But he succeeded. Under his will's intervention, those few key formation lines darkened sharply, then reversed in a way that violated the original rules. Puff! Far away, an enormous backlash seemed to hit Nangong Qing's main body, causing its massive will striking the stone chamber to let out a painful muffled sound, suddenly weakening significantly. And inside the stone chamber, the disintegration speed of that pale golden light ball suddenly accelerated. It became almost transparent. No!
The old shell emitted a desperate roar, with more and more cracks appearing on its surface, as if it would crumble at any moment. At that moment, Shaoling had already pounced onto the deep blue light ball. The light ball, like a weary bird returning to the forest, instantly merged into her body. Ah 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 ah. Shaoling let out a long howl, filled with both pain and relief. A vast and pure resentment erupted from her petite body like a tsunami, instantly filling the entire stone chamber. Her body flickered within the black mist, becoming more solid, and in her pitch-black eyes, madness and chaos faded significantly, replaced by anger and clarity. She regained part of her core, as well as more memories and powers that had been stripped away. Almost simultaneously, a change occurred on Nangongwan's side. At the moment her soul thought connected with that moonwhite light ball, she trembled violently. Silver-white light once again radiated from her body, but this time, it was not the previous cold indifference. Chapter 27, Farewell. The ground shook, and the whole stone chamber trembled fiercely, as if it would completely collapse any second. Go! Hurry up! Gu Qingchen shouted sharply, one hand tightly gripping the weak Nangongwan, while the other hand intensified the light of the soul-guiding lamp to barely deflect the falling rocks aimed at them. Shaoling reacted quickly, the overwhelming resentment forming a barrier above the three of them. She smashed the larger stones, but her small face was filled with effort. The vibrations from below and the terrifying awakening aura instinctively made her feel fear. Down there, that thing is so scary. Little Ling's voice was tinged with a cry. It is the foundation of the family, also a prison. Nangongwan struggled to speak amid the violent shaking, the newly fused memories making her understand many things. Father has gone mad, actually trying to forcibly awaken it. This will destroy everything. The three of them hurriedly rushed up the spiraling stone steps, the stone chamber behind them collapsing and burying them in a booming sound. Bursting out of the underground study, the scene outside was even more terrifying. The entire Nangong manor was wailing, the earth cracked, the corridor columns leaned, the rockery collapsed, and countless ghostly spirits shrieked and scattered in chaos, as if the apocalypse had arrived. The gray sky seemed like it was about to collapse. Go to the backyard, there is the nearest way to leave the manor. Nangongwan pointed in one direction, her understanding of the manor becoming more complete. Gu Qingchen carried the almost immobile Nangongwan, Little Ling cleared the way in front, anger sweeping away obstacles, and the three rushed desperately towards the backyard. The path was in disarray, with uncontrolled corpse soldiers or mad ghosts occasionally pouncing, all torn apart ruthlessly by Little Ling. The light of the guiding soul lamp in Gu Qingchen's hand grew weaker and weaker, cracks spreading, clearly reaching its limit. Finally, the side door to the outside world in the backyard came into view. However, just at that moment, boom! A dark red beam of light suddenly shot up into the sky from the center of the manor. In the beam, a distorted and fierce face of Nan Gongqing could be vaguely seen. No one can leave. His mad roar shook the heavens and the earth. Since I cannot have it, then let's all return to silence. As he roared, the earth split open a deep, bottomless chasm. A magnificent aura emanated from the depths of the earth. A giant hand, composed of countless pale arms and twisted resentment, slowly reached out from the crack. Where it passed, everything decayed, collapsed, and turned to nothingness. Is this the true foundation suppressing the Nangong manor? Or rather, is it a monster that even Nan Gongqing cannot fully control? The giant hand seemed to sense the presence of living beings, slowly reaching toward Gu Qingchen and the others. Its speed appeared slow, yet it rendered escape impossible. Despair instantly gripped everyone's hearts. Gu Qingchen gritted his teeth, preparing to risk everything to use rule control for one last fight, even if the backlash could be fatal. Nangongwan's eyes also flashed with determination, silver light emerging again from her depths, as if she was about to make a final deal with the existence within her body to exchange for strength. At that moment, son-in-law, young lady, over here, a firm voice rang out. It turned out that the maid Xiao Chui had somehow run out from the chaos, her hair disheveled, her face covered in dust, but she tightly clutched an ancient-looking black box that seemed heavy. Xiao Chui. How did you? Gu Qingchen was startled. I sneaked into the master's study and found this. It seems to be something that can temporarily affect that monster. Xiao Chui gasped as she shoved the black box into Gu Qingchen's hands, then turned swiftly, staring at the increasingly close terrifying giant hand, her small body trembling violently with fear, yet she spread her arms to block it. Xiao Chui. Come back. Nangongwan called out urgently. You too, quickly go. Xiao Chui turned her head, tears mingled with dust on her face, but she revealed an extremely forced smile. Xiao Chui has been useless, always so timid, but this time I don't want to just watch anymore. I'm here too. Little Ling suddenly called out, her dark eyes filled with an unprecedented determination as she looked at the terrifying giant hand. Little Ling isn't afraid, Little Ling will protect elder sister and big brother. Her surrounding resentment erupted violently, no longer chaotic, but instead condensing into a solid black barrier, standing side by side with Xiao Chui before the monstrous hand of destruction.
Shaoling! Don't! Nangong Wan's eyes were filled with rage.
That giant hand was already approaching, and Shaoling's barrier of resentment began to crumble like paper. Xiao Chui was even more overwhelmed by the terrifying aura and fell directly to the ground, blood spilling from her mouth and nose, but she still held on, using her body as the last shield.
Run!
Shaoling and Xiao Chui shouted out their final screams simultaneously. Gu Qingqian's eyes turned blood red. He knew this was the last chance for them, fought for with their lives. He picked up Nangong Wan and, using his last strength, charged towards the side door.
Rule control. Distorted rules on the door.
The guiding lamp burned away the last trace of light.
Boom.
The talisman on the side door shattered under the double impact, and the door was burst open.
Just as they burst through the side door,
a short, despairing cry came from behind from Shaoling and Xiao Chui. And the terrifying sound of the giant hand closing. Gu Qingqian didn't dare turn back. Holding Nangong Wan, he ran wildly along the desolate path outside the mansion, until he was completely far away from the hellish Nangong residence.
Dragon Country livestream. The live stream had just started. What happened? An earthquake. Wow.
Did Nangong Mansion collapse?
What was that giant hand just now? So terrifying.
The little maid and that little ghost are they?
Crying.
Xiao Chui, although timid, was really brave in the end.
Shaoling too. She was obviously so scared. Shengu and Wan Jia escaped. S-level dungeon. Is this over? Dragon Country's national fortune increased by 10%. Resource recovery accelerated. But the mood is so complicated.
Announcement: Dragon Country's chosen one, Gu Qingqian, successfully cleared the S-level dungeon, The Wedding of Nangong Mansion. Hidden plot completion rate 90%, evaluation SS.
Reward calculation in progress. Gu Qingqian is awesome. Long live Wan Jia.
Salute to Xiao Chui and Shaoling.
Hope they still have a chance. In a safe house arranged in a certain area of Dragon Country, reality returned.
Gu Qingqian slowly opened his eyes. The fatigue from deep within his soul surged like a tide. He found himself lying on a soft bed, and outside the window was the long-lost sunlight.
He was back. He really returned from that nightmarish Nangong Mansion.
But there was little joy in his heart, only heavy sadness and emptiness. Xiao Chui's last tearful smile and Shaoling's decisive shout were branded in his mind like a seal.
Chapter 28, Misty Lonely Island.
Gu Qingqian and Nangong Wan exchanged a glance, and the warmth of the evening sun in the air seemed to dissipate instantly, replaced by a sense of pressure.
Misty Lonely Island. Multiple teams.
Gu Qingqian repeated the keywords in a low voice, his gaze sharpened. A new challenge, the mode had changed.
Nangong Wan put down her teacup and said calmly, multiple means there will be other chosen ones.
A month of rest and initial power fusion had made her no longer the weird being who could only passively endure.
Gu Qingqian nodded. Cooperation and competition coexist, it's more complex. He looked at Nangong Wan. Wanner, how is your condition recovering?
My power has recovered some, and my control is a bit better.
Nangong Wan answered truthfully.
But that moonlight still cannot be touched lightly. She referred to the power of the fragment of the divine soul within her, which was both a trump card and a hidden danger.
That's enough. Gu Qingqian said.
This time, stick close to me.
When necessary, I might need you to act.
He spoke naturally, without an ounce of embarrassment at being reliant on her. Having experienced life and death together in Nangong Mansion and having cultivated their feelings over these days, they no longer needed any false politeness.
Nangong Wan's power was an important part of their survival. Using it wisely was intelligence, not shame. Nangong Wan gently responded with an
In the next 20 or so hours, the two wasted no time. Using the limited information provided by Dragon Country's analysis group, they briefly planned their resource preparation, established basic communication code, and reconfirmed each other's condition. Gu Qingqian also attempted to further familiarize himself with the rule control talent, sensing the invisible lines of rules, but until the information of Misty Lonely Island was activated, he couldn't.
A haze enveloped the air.
In the moment the countdown hit 0, a familiar feeling of detachment washed over.
Transmission starting target, Misty Isle. Cold, damp.
The salty, fishy sea breeze mixed with thick fog hit his face.
Gu Qingqian suddenly opened his eyes, finding himself lying on a rough beach.
The cold sand and stones beneath him, the sound of waves crashing nearby, and all around was a gray-white, swirling fog, visibility less than 10 meters. He quickly turned and sat up, immediately checking his condition. Beside him, Nangong Wan also woke up almost simultaneously, cautiously surveying the surroundings. She was still wearing that modern dress, but in this environment, it seemed far too thin. Dragon Country livestream opened. Here we go. New dungeon. Whoa. This fog is way too thick. I can't see anything. Brother Chen and Sister One seem to be okay. Where's the multiplayer mode? Where is everyone else? This environment feels so oppressive, even worse than Nangong Mansion. Are you okay? Gu Qingchen asked as he pulled Nangong Wan up. Her hand was cold, but not the weak coldness from before, it held a sense of strength. I'm fine. Nangong Wan shook her head, her silver gray eyes. Normally black, but shimmering silver when alert or using power. Glimmered slightly in the dense fog. The fog here is strange, it interferes with perception. Gu Qingchen noticed too, his rule control ability heavily suppressed here, only able to vaguely sense numerous chaotic fragments of rules around him, like fog, elusive and hard to catch. The two quickly checked their surroundings. Aside from their clothes, they had nothing else. No weapons, no food, no tools. A classic deserted island survival start. Rustle. Faint footsteps and suppressed breathing emerged from the fog. More than one direction. Soon, shadowy figures began to materialize from the mist. Counting Gu Qingchen and Nangong Wan, there were 8 people total. The others gradually woke up, looking bewildered, alert, and frightened at each other and the surrounding environment. The group was diverse. A bald, muscular man in a tactical vest from the Bear Country. A skinny young man from the Stick Country, trembling with a tablet in his hands and wearing gold-rimmed glasses. An old man in monk's robes, holding prayer beads, with a compassionate expression, from the Heavenly India. A tall, fiery-haired woman, dressed provocatively with sharp eyes, from the Sunset Country. A terrified girl in a school uniform, looking about 18 or 19, from the Cherry Blossom Country. And a middle-aged man in tattered work clothes, dark-skinned, with a dull gaze, from a certain country in Black Continent. A typical gathering of chosen ones for strange tales. Eclectic, each with their own thoughts. What the hell is this place? The muscular man was the first to swear, his voice rough and heavily accented. Fog, such thick fog. No signal at all, the glasses-wearing man frantically tapped his tablet, clearly getting no response. The monk murmured prayers, seemingly trying to calm himself. The fiery-haired woman scanned the crowd calmly, her gaze lingering on Gu Qingchen and Nangong Wan for a few extra seconds, as if sensing their unusualness. The schoolgirl began to quietly sob. The man in work clothes silently squatted on the ground, scooping up a handful of sand, letting it flow from his fingers. 8 people, Ivan from Bear Country, Dr. Jean from Stick Country, the ascetic from Heavenly India, Rose from Sunset Country, the student from Cherry Blossom Country, and the representative from Black Continent? This combination is amazing. Brother Chen and Sister Wan exude grace. Starting with nothing is tough. Everyone. The fiery-haired woman spoke first, her voice calm. It seems we've been thrown into the same dreadful game, complaining won't help. If we want to survive, we better cooperate. Let's introduce ourselves. You can call me Rose, former Royal Air Corps. Her presence was strong, instantly capturing the attention of most. Ivan. The Bear Country man kept it brief, patting his sturdy chest. Hunter. Jean. Jean Zhangxian. Network engineer, the glasses-wearing man's voice trembled. Amit Ba. The old monk from Tianzhu slightly nodded his head. The girl in the school uniform sobbed, I am Xiao Ziying, a university student. The man in work clothes fell silent for a moment and spoke in rough English, Kalu, minor. Everyone's gaze finally landed on Gu Qingchen and Nangong Wan. Gu Qingchen. Nangong Wan. The two reported their names, without any extra information. Rose raised an eyebrow, seeming somewhat surprised by their indifference, but she didn't ask more. Alright, now is not the time for deeper connections. The urgent matter is to understand the rules here, find water and food, and a shelter. This fog makes me feel very uneasy. Everyone agreed, in the face of unknown terror, sticking together was instinctive. Just as they were about to explore the beach. Gulu Gulu. A worn-out wooden box wrapped in mud was pushed to the shore by the waves, coming to rest not far from the group. Chapter 29, Trade. The items on the cart were rusty and the bread was dry and black, but for the forsaken wanderers, they radiated an irresistible temptation. Especially that rusty knife and broken water bottle, which were almost essentials for survival. However, the terms of trade were so strange. Barter, or exchange with a story. They had just ended up here, and besides their clothes, they had nothing. So, only stories remained. Stories? What stories? The burly man Ivan furrowed his brow, his voice filled with impatience. I can hunt and fight, but I can't tell stories. Jean Zhengxian from the state of Sticks adjusted his glasses, his eyes flickering. Stories, do they mean our experiences? Or, can we just make something up? He seemed to be thinking of taking advantage. The monk from Tianju, Prashun, joined his hands together.
All beings suffer, all have stories, perhaps the benefactor wishes to hear of worldly joys and sorrows. Rose from the Sunset Country was the calmest. She stepped forward and addressed the hunchbacked figure under the tattered cloak.
We need water and food, as well as tools. What kind of story can be exchanged?
The shadow by the cart issued an extremely hoarse voice, pointing at the wooden sign on the cart handle, giving no further indication. The meaning was clear, the rules were written, and it was up to them to interpret.
The atmosphere suddenly froze.
No one was willing to be the first to try. Who knew what this story actually meant?
Would there be a trap?
Gu Chengchen's gaze swept over the cart, then looked at the thick, impenetrable fog, quickly weighing his options. Rule mastery, the talent's analysis of the local rules remained difficult, but he attempted to focus on sensing this cart merchant.
Vague information feedback. A neutral entity, following trade rules, desiring emotion or information as currency. False stories might provoke disgust, while real stories filled with strong emotions held more value. Risk, unknown.
At this moment, the trembling girl from Sakura Country, Xiao Ziying, suddenly spoke timidly.
I have a story that my grandma told me about the story of the fairy in the mist. Is that okay?
She seemed to think that a fairy tale might just pass the test. The figure by the cart's head moved slightly, seemingly looking at her. Encouraged, Xiao Ziying softly began telling a tale about a kind fairy guiding the lost in the mist. The story was beautiful but told in a dry manner, lacking emotion. As soon as she finished, the shadow by the cart suddenly waved a hand. An invisible force directly pushed Xiao Ziying a few steps back, causing her to fall onto the sand.
The hoarse voice carried obvious anger. False. Hollow. Worthless.
Xiao Ziying was so frightened that she cried out.
Everyone's expression changed.
It seemed that simply making up a story or lacking genuine feeling was not acceptable.
Rose's gaze hardened, seemingly making a decision.
She took a deep breath, stepped forward. I have a story about my last mission in the desert, where I lost my best partner to save a child. Her voice was calm, yet contained suppressed pain. She concisely described the difficulty of that mission, the sacrifice of her comrades, and the choices and regrets of that final moment. This is a true, cruel story filled with strong emotions. The figure by the cart quietly listened, and beneath the tattered cloak, a satisfied sigh seemed to emerge. When Rose finished speaking, it reached out its bony hand, picked through the cart, and took the most intact water bottle and a small piece of bread that did not look so black and hard, handing them to Rose.
Equal exchange.
A hoarse voice rang out. Rose took the items, silently stepped back, her eyes full of complexity. This story clearly stirred her unpleasant memories. With a demonstration, the others seemed to understand. The monk, Prashun, stepped forward and told a story about a believer awakening to life and death by the Ganges, ultimately letting go of attachment, filled with philosophy and compassion. He exchanged it for a small roll of clean bandage. The miner, Karu, told with rough English a tale of witnessing his companions buried during a mining disaster deep underground, surviving by chance yet forever trapped in darkness and fear. He exchanged it for a rusty but seemingly sturdy machete. Jin Zhengxian adjusted his glasses and shared how he uncovered a conspiracy of a big tycoon through internet technology, yet was chased, eventually reduced to this situation. He exchanged it for a fishhook and a small piece of fishing line.
It was Ivan's turn.
The strong man scratched his bald head, struggled for a moment, and in a rough voice, told how he single-handedly killed an adult brown bear with a dagger in the Siberian jungle, filled with wildness and strength. He exchanged it for a small pack of matches.
Finally, only Gu Qingchen and Nangong Wan were left. All eyes turned to them.
Gu Qingchen hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. He naturally had many stories, such as the terrifying experiences in the Nangong residence, but that involved too many secrets, which he could never reveal. After thinking, he decided to tell a story about loneliness. He spoke of his experience as an orphan, facing the world alone during countless cold days, learning silence and observation, living like a shadow. His tone was calm and unruffled, yet it perfectly portrayed that bone-deep feeling of loneliness. The figure by the cart listened quietly and finally handed him a multifunctional military knife, considered a generous reward. Now, only Nangong Wan was left.
Nangong Wan frowned slightly.
Her experience was even more bizarre, spent mostly in a deep mansion, filled with despair and coldness, and ultimately involving fragments of the soul, which could not be explained at all. She hesitated about how to start speaking. At this moment, Jin Zhengxian suddenly moved a bit closer, wearing a self-assured gentlemanly smile, and said to Nangong Wan,
"This beautiful lady, if you don't have a story, perhaps you can offer something else like a sweet smile? Or tell me your name and contact information? Once we leave this hell, I can take you to experience the splendor of soul."
His gaze wandered on Nangong Wan's cold and stunning face, full of unabashed admiration.
Wow! This guy is really bold. Daring to flirt with Sister Wan. Brother Chen's expression instantly turned cold.
Ha, there's a good show to watch.
Sister Wan belongs to Brother Chen, this guy is asking for trouble. Gu Qingchen's face darkened immediately, and with a cold gaze, he swept a glance at Jin Zhangxian, discreetly pulling Nangong Wan behind him for protection. Though he knew Wan could handle herself, the feeling of her being coveted made him very uncomfortable. Nangong Wan was also taken aback, and then her beautiful brows slightly furrowed, a clear hint of disgust surfaced on her cold face. She was not ignorant of the outside world. In this past month, she had learned a lot through television and the internet, naturally understanding the frivolous meaning in his words. Chapter 30, Is the lady feeling jealous? After walking for a while. Stop. The one in the front, Ivan, suddenly raised his hand. Lower your voice. He listened carefully, his thick brows tightly knitted. Up ahead, there's no sound. Not only the sound of water but even the occasional rustle of unknown insects had completely vanished. An absolute silence that felt especially eerie in this fog. Gu Qingchen pulled Nangong Wan a little closer to himself and whispered, "How do you feel?" Nangong Wan's silvery gray eyes scanned the swirling mist ahead with caution, shaking her head slightly. "The moisture is thick, but it feels lifeless, not like flowing water." She paused and added, "That sense of stillness is coming from the front." Rose made a gesture for everyone to spread out and be on guard. Ivan and Karu tightened their grip on their knives, cautiously moving forward, one to the left and the other to the right. After about 10 more meters, the mist seemed to thin slightly, revealing a vague scene ahead. It was a small pool of water. The water was as black as ink, the surface smooth like a mirror, without a single ripple. Around the pool, not a blade of grass grew, only slick black rocks. That nauseating fishy smell was emanating directly from the pool. Is this the water source? Jin Zhangxian pinched his nose, a look of disgust on his face. Rule number 2, flowing water does not rot, stagnant water is toxic. This is obviously stagnant water. Sakura Koizumi stepped back in fear. This water looks terrifying. The monk Puxian's face was serious. This water is filled with deep resentment. It is an ominous sign. The rules are very clear, stagnant water is toxic. This pool was clearly undrinkable. Ivan reluctantly poked at the black mud by the pool with his machete, finding nothing. Karu carefully observed the surroundings of the pool, shaking his head, indicating that he found no signs of any water source seeping out. Hope had fallen flat, wasting both time and energy. The atmosphere felt a bit oppressive. What now? Jin Zhangxian asked, a little anxious. It seems to be getting darker. Though the thick fog obscured visibility, the light was undeniably fading at a visible speed, signaling that night was approaching. Rule number 4, at night, you must stay within the light source. A dark night means disaster. They only had one candlestick and a small piece of candle. Should we retreat to the beach? Or go in the other direction that one said? Gu Qingchen looked at Rose. She was now the temporary leader. Rose shook her head decisively. The beach offers no hiding places, it's too dangerous. Let's head in the other direction, time may be running out. She looked at Nangong Wan. How far is that direction? What does hollow echo mean? Nangong Wan closed her eyes to sense for a moment, then opened them. Not too far, but the path may be difficult. That echo feels like a large space with wind passing through, but there are also chaotic unknown scents, hard to distinguish. If there is space, there might be a place to hide, but unknown scents mean risk. Let's take a chance. Rose immediately decided. Let's move quickly. Karu, Ivan, you lead the way. Dr. Jean, keep an eye on the back. Gu, Nangong, support in the middle. Master Puxian, please take care of Sakura, quick. The team moved again, quickly heading towards the second direction Nangong Wan sensed. This time they moved faster because the light was rapidly fading, and the color of the mist seemed to stain deeper like ink. The path indeed became rugged, often requiring them to climb slippery rocks or pass through unknown dry vines. The light dimmed further, and visibility decreased even more. Ah! Sakura Koizumi suddenly let out a short scream, falling to the ground. She struggled to get up, only to find that her ankle was tangled in a cluster of twisted dry vines, tightening the more she struggled. Don't move. Puxian quickly stepped forward, trying to help her untangle, but the dry vines were unusually tough. Hiss. A bright flash of a blade cut through. It was Gu Qingchen. The military knife in his hand accurately severed the vines. His movements were clean and swift. Thank you, Mr. Gu. Sakura Koizumi, still shaken, blushed slightly, whispering her thanks, her eyes filled with gratitude and a hint of admiration. Gu Qingchen's calm and strong demeanor easily drew reliance in such an environment. A trivial matter. Gu Qingchen nodded lightly and retracted his military knife. He didn't notice that Nangong Wan's gaze quickly scanned between him and Sakura. Her lips slightly pursed. Ah, Sister One seemed to steal a glance. Sakura's eyes are a bit off. Brother Chen's charm is as hard to place as the reader's. Agreed. Sister One, staring. Brother Chen's straightforward answer, well done. The team continued to move forward. Finally, as the sky grew nearly dark and the thick fog turned pitch black like ink, they reached their destination. It was a massive cave entrance. Scattered at the entrance were some wild beast bones and broken wooden box fragments, and a stale wind blew from inside, carrying dust. The hollow echoes were the sounds of the wind passing through the cave. "It's here," Nangongwan confirmed, but her brows remained furrowed. "The air inside is even more chaotic. There are many regrets." At this moment, they couldn't care too much. Rose was the first to light the bronze candlestick. The dim candlelight could only illuminate a small area near the entrance, beyond it was the devouring darkness. This faint light felt like a flicker of life, bringing a slight sense of safety. "Go in. Be careful." Rose held the candlestick high and stepped into the cave first, with others following closely behind. The cave's interior was more spacious than imagined, with a relatively flat ground, seemingly showing signs of human excavation. But the staleness and the air of regret grew thicker, unsettling everyone. The candlelight was limited, only illuminating their feet. In the darkness, it felt like countless eyes were watching these uninvited guests. "This seems like someone has been here?" Ivan used the tip of his blade to lift a piece of rotten cloth from the ground. Karoo was feeling along the rocky wall and suddenly said, "There are inscriptions." Everyone gathered around, and under the candlelight, they saw some blurred writing carved into the rock wall. It seemed written by different people at different times, using various languages, most filled with despair. "Don't trust the voices in the fog. They fear the light, but are also attracted to it. Night watch. Someone must always keep watch. On the third night, it came. We will all die here." The handwriting was hasty and chaotic, sending chills down one's spine. These were left by the previous survivors? Night watch. Rose caught the key phrase. The rules require light, and these messages also emphasize keeping watch. It seems that light must not be lost at night, and someone must stay awake. She looked at the slowly burning candle, worried. This candle can't last the whole night. Chapter 31, The Night Watchman. That pale, swollen hand moved with an eerie speed, rushing towards the burning dry branch, bringing a chilling wind with it. Its purpose was extremely clear. To extinguish the light source. "Be careful." Rose reacted the fastest, shouting sharply as she swung her machete, not aimed at the hand. Rule number 5, do not provoke actively, but towards the empty space in front of the target dry branch, trying to drive it back. Almost simultaneously, Ivan yelled and kicked the ground, sending a cloud of rubble and dust flying towards the cave entrance. However, that ghostly hand was surprisingly nimble, twisting in the air, evading Rose's blade and Ivan's rubble, its 5 fingers clawing towards the dry branch. Seeing the light source about to be destroyed. Buzz. An invisible wave suddenly expanded from Nangongwan's center. It was not an attack but similar to a kind of intimidation. That ghostly hand suddenly froze, as if hitting an invisible wall, its movement instantly slowing down for a moment. A thin layer of white frost even formed on its pale skin. In this fleeting moment of delay, Gu Qingchen moved. He didn't use the knife but shot out his left hand like lightning, not grabbing the ghostly hand but, just in time, snatching the burning dry branch back before it could touch it. His right-hand military knife was held horizontally in front of him, watchfully staring at the cave entrance. The ghostly hand grasped at empty air, seemingly enraged by Nangongwan's cold energy, letting out a sharp, piercing hiss as it quickly retreated into the darkness outside the cave. The malicious crying abruptly ceased. Silence fell within the cave, leaving only the heavy breathing of the group and the crackling sounds from the campfire. That last moment was a sudden flurry, filled with danger. What was that just now? Xiao Ziying's voice trembled. The locals, or one of them? Rosa's face grew serious as she sheathed her knife. They fear the light, but are also attracted to it, and they will try to destroy the source of light. The warning was real. Everyone's gaze instinctively turned to the dwindling campfire and the barely remaining candle, their moods heavy. Fuel was limited, the night was long, and this kind of attack might not be the only one. "Thank you, Miss Nangong, for just now." Rose looked at Nangongwan with gratitude in her eyes. That icy energy just now was not something an ordinary person could emit. Nangongwan nodded slightly and replied briefly, "Just a small effort." Then she fell silent and gently moved back beside Gu Chengchen. What seemed like a casual action had actually drained a considerable amount of her newly integrated power. Gu Chengchen naturally noticed this, wrapping his arm around her and transmitting a warm inner energy to her. "You okay?" he whispered. "No harm done, just a little cold." Nangongwan softly replied, letting his warmth disperse the chill from using her power, a feeling that brought her comfort and even some attachment. "Sister Wan is awesome. What was that just now? A cold attack?" "Chen Gu cares, hurry and hold her tight." They worked together perfectly, husband and wife in harmony. Jin Zhengxian watched the closeness between the two, his eyes flickering as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he held back, merely adjusting his glasses to conceal his awkwardness.
Pu Shan murmured a Buddhist chant, looking outside the cave with pity. The resentment has taken shape, unable to be reborn. It is also pitiful.
Pitiful my ass. Ivan spat. Almost got us all killed. What do we do now? This fire won't last until dawn.
Indeed, after the recent turmoil, the campfire had noticeably weakened, and the life-saving candle was reduced to just a tiny stub. They had to find a way to last until dawn.
Collect anything that can burn, dry vines, bones. Rose decisively ordered.
Conserve fuel, keep the fire small, as long as it maintains a glow, the watchers should stay extra alert. Everyone immediately sprang into action, searching for anything combustible within the limited space of the cave. The situation was worse than they had imagined. Apart from what they had found earlier, there was almost no supplement.
Time passed slowly amidst tension and oppression.
The darkness outside was thick as ink, and in the silence, it seemed to hide countless pairs of malicious eyes, ready to attack again at any moment.
Every slight flicker of the flame made everyone's hearts leap to their throats.
Gu Chengchen held Nangongwan close, keeping a vigilant eye on their surroundings while softly conversing with her to distract her attention and ease his own tension.
When we get back, I'll take you to eat hot pot, steaming hot, I guarantee you won't be cold.
He chuckled softly.
Nangongwan blinked, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Hot pot? Is it very spicy?
Her knowledge of modern food mostly came from television. You can adjust the flavors, there's also a clear broth, good for your stomach, you'll definitely like it.
Gu Chengchen described.
Various fresh meats and vegetables dipped in bubbling broth, then with sauce.
Listening to him, Nangongwan seemed to feel less cold and even swallowed lightly, softly saying, "What my husband says, I want to try." Then it's settled. Gu Chengchen smiled tightly, holding her hand. The first thing we do when we get back is eat hot pot.
Whoa, the best sweetness in a desperate situation. Shengu is really good, already looking forward to Sister Wan trying hot pot.
Please stream the hot pot eating. I'll honor this dog food first.
Just as the two whispered, in the deepest darkness of the cave. Suddenly, a very faint sound came. The sound was soft, but in the extremely silent environment, it was especially clear.
What is that sound?
Karu was the first to hear it, looking vigilantly into the dark depths.
Everyone held their breath, nervously glancing in that direction. Could there be something inside the cave?
The sound was intermittent, as if something was moving with great difficulty. Rose signaled everyone to be quiet, while she raised the candlestick and carefully shone the light toward the source of the sound. The candlelight was limited, illuminating only a small area ahead. Vaguely, it seemed that there were some scattered objects and rubble piled up in the depths.
The sound seemed to be coming from behind a pile of rocks. Who is there? Come out.
Rose said firmly, gripping her knife tightly. There was no response, only the rustling sounds continued. Gu Qingchen protected Nangongwan behind him, and with his rule control ability subtly operating, he sensed that area.
The feedback information was extremely weak and chaotic, seeming to lack strong malice, but it was full of pain and despair.
Suddenly, an extremely weak voice, as if it hadn't spoken for hundreds of years, came intermittently from behind the stone pile.
Light, is it light? And, are there, living people? It was a human voice. Everyone was taken aback.
Rose did not relax her vigilance and continued to ask, "Who are you?"
"Guard, night watchman."
The voice answered with great difficulty.
Chapter 32, The Song of the Spring Water.
The daylight was like a shy girl, slowly driving away the thick darkness outside the cave, restoring the grayish mist between heaven and earth. Although it was still hazy, compared to the engulfing night, it was already much more reassuring. Inside the cave, the bonfire had long extinguished, leaving only ashes and the finally burnt-out candle stump. The stone tablet rules that the night watchman exchanged for his life contained a great deal of information, and there were many contradictions. Especially the last sentence, "Do not fully trust any rules," cast a layer of doubt over all established judgments.
Only during the month of the fog tide will the lighthouse be pointed out.
Rose rubbed her forehead, her expression weary.
We need to know today's date. Without a reference point, it's hard to tell. Jin Zhengxian shook his head. Unless we find more clues. The water source is key. Gu Qingchen spoke, his gaze sweeping over the cracked lips of everyone. The second rule mentions living water may move. Pay attention to the song of the spring water. We must find the living water as soon as possible. Dehydration can kill faster than hunger. The song of the spring water?
Xiao Ziying was puzzled.
Does it refer to the sound of flowing water? It may not just be an ordinary water sound.
Nangongwan added softly, her silver-gray eyes flickering slightly as she listened for a moment. The sounds around are very chaotic, but there is one direction. It seems there is a very faint rhythm, different from other chaotic whispers. She was more sensitive to this kind of sound on an energetic level.
This was undoubtedly a guide. Then let's set off. Rose decisively decided.
Along the direction pointed out by Miss Nangong, Ivan, Karu, you guys clear the way, be careful, Dr. Jean, be sure to record the terrain, Master Prashan, Xiaoze, stay close, Gu, Nangong, please cover the rear and guide the direction. No one disagreed. After simply collecting the few remaining items, the team once again stepped into the thick fog. The daytime fog seemed even thicker than when it first landed yesterday, and the first rule stated, the fog density changes daily, thinnest at noon, thickest at midnight. Clearly it was not yet noon. The direction pointed by Nangong Wan was not an easy path, requiring continual detours around marshy mud puddles and through thicker, oddly shaped withered woods. The fog hampered visibility, and every step had to be taken with great caution. Along the way, Jin Zhengxian seemed very active, perhaps trying to make up for his earlier mistakes, continuously filming the terrain with his tablet, even attempting to analyze the fog's composition, and occasionally trying to spark a conversation with Nangong Wan. Miss Nangong, does sensing that kind of rhythm take a lot of energy? It's truly an amazing ability. Miss Nangong, look at the shape of this moss, isn't it unique? Perhaps it has some symbolic meaning? Miss Nangong. Nangong Wan occasionally cast a cold glance at him, or simply ignored him altogether, mostly staying close to Gu Qingchen, occasionally whispering to him to correct his direction. Gu Qingchen didn't show much reaction, but would quietly sidestep to create space when Jin Zhengxian got too close, or simply reminded him lightly. Dr. Jin, watch your step, stay close to the team. Haha, the Korean is still trying to curry favor. Sister Wan isn't giving him any attention, not even a glance. Brother Chen's little protective gestures for his wife. Dr. Jin, I'm so embarrassed, but I can't say anything. Once again, when Jin Zhengxian tried to move closer to analyze a peculiar glowing stone at Nangong Wan's feet, Gu Qingchen directly wrapped an arm around her waist, gently pulling her to his other side, speaking in a calm tone, this path is easier to walk on. Nangong Wan leaned against him, glanced up at him, and with a barely noticeable smile at the corners of her lips, whispered in a voice only the two of them could hear, husband, today, seem especially alert? Gu Qingchen remained expressionless, leaning down to reply in her ear, his warm breath brushing against her, it's mainly to prevent falls, this path is slippery, it wouldn't be good if someone careless bumped into my wife. His tone was serious, but his eyes held a teasing glint. Nangong Wan felt her ears heating up, lightly pinching the inner side of his arm, smooth talker. Yet, she felt comforted, and the slight annoyance caused by the outsiders faded away. It's happening again. Whispers by the ear. Brother Chen, I'm jealous but I won't say it outright. Sister Wan appears to dislike it but is secretly thrilled, this dog food is killing me. Dr. Jin, learn from this is the correct posture. Jin Zhengxian watched their intimate interaction, once again feeling a bit embarrassed, adjusting his glasses awkwardly, and finally quieted down for the moment. The team continued forward in silence and vigilance. After walking for more than an hour, the terrain around them began to undulate, and the mist seemed to thin slightly. At that moment, Nangong Wan suddenly stopped, tilting her ear to listen, her face revealing a hint of certainty. I heard it, that rhythm, it's close, just below that slope ahead. Everyone perked up. Carefully descending the slope, they pushed aside a layer of dense, dew-covered, bizarre vines, and the sight before them took everyone's breath away. It was a small area where the mist was thin. In the center of the area, it wasn't a static pool of water, but instead, a clear stream was gushing out from a crack in a moss-covered rock wall, flowing into a clear-bottomed stone basin below, then quietly seeping underground as if it had never appeared. More importantly, the stream was indeed producing an extremely ethereal, melodious, and faint sound, like the wind brushing against a frozen string. This was the song of the spring. Moreover, that stream and the water in the basin emitted a soft white glow under the sparse daylight. The third rule, edible things emit a faint light. It's living water. Water you can drink. Ivan was the first to get excited, his throat dry to the point of burning, unable to resist moving forward. Wait. Rose was more cautious and stopped him, looking at Nangong Wan and Gu Qingchen. Is it safe to confirm? Gu Qingchen utilized rule control to sense, the feedback indicated pure, full of vitality, harmless. Nangong Wan nodded as well, the song is pure, with no noise. Only then did Rose breathe a sigh of relief. Quick, refill the water bottles, and conserve it. We don't know how long this spring water will last. Everyone quickly gathered by the basin, carefully filling their only water bottles with the glowing clear spring water. The water was icy and sweet, instantly refreshing their parched throats, as if it even dispelled some of their fatigue. After filling his water bottle, Jin Zhengxian couldn't help but want to scoop some water in his hands to wash his face. Silently blocked by Kalu. The rules only said what could be eaten, but didn't say it was forbidden to touch, but being cautious is never wrong. Just as everyone relaxed a little and had some water,